Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. This meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck?
Here.
Councilors Verdick? Here. Corrigan? Here. Raff?
Here.
Afghan?
Here.
Boop?
Here.
And Wendland will be joining us shortly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, everyone, will you please stand, remove your hats, and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first item on the agenda is public comment. If you are here to provide public comment and have not already done so, please complete one of these white forms available on the back table and hand it to Ms. Linder. But first up is Gail Walmark. Gail, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes to deliver your comments. You know, you've been here before. You know the routine. It's good to see you.
Good afternoon, councilors and everyone. I'm here speaking on...
Just give your name for the record, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm Gail Walmark, speaking on behalf of Friends of Luscher Farm. And we saw that the facility use agreement with Wild Geese Farm is included in today's consent agenda for your approval. And I know that means there will be no mention or discussion about it, but we wanted our enthusiasm for the uninterrupted continuation of the city's beloved and very important community-supported agriculture program to be on the record. We very much appreciate the efforts of the Parks Department, farm staff, and others for moving with urgency late last year to work with local farming experts to optimize the search effort and simplify the contracting process so the new and current CSA farmers could begin and complete transitioning during these critical winter months. We are excited to welcome Wild Geese farmers, Braden and Sydney. They're eager, outgoing, next-generation farmers dedicated and committed to sustainable best practice urban agriculture and providing the healthiest, most delicious, locally grown produce for our community. We're also very thankful to Laura Masterson and her 47th Avenue farm operation for pioneering our CSA some 20 years ago. And for helping us in the years since to celebrate and appreciate the legacy of family farming in our community. With your approval today, we know the reins of our CSA are passing into great hands to usher us into the next 20 years. For our part, Friends of Luscher Farm will support and assist Wild Geese Farm in any way we can, and of course, we'll continue our advocacy for the expansion of agricultural and environmental programs at Luscher Farm Park. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Walmark. Appreciate it. Cindy Rogers. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. My name is Cindy Rogers, and I am your Municipal Relationship Manager for Republic Services. As you know, Republic Services has had the privilege of being the exclusive solid waste and recycling franchise hauler for the City of Lake Oswego and has been for several decades. We have and will continue to support the recycling efforts of the City of Lake Oswego's businesses and residents while remaining in compliance with city, county, and state laws. In contrast, Ridwell has been operating in violation of the city's regulations for more than 4 years, not even obtaining a business license. Over the past 4+ years, according to their website, they've acquired 1,218 customers within Lake Oswego. Ridwell continued to operate even after the city's attorney sent them a cease operations letter on March of 2021. The city's attorney directed Ridwell to contact Republic Services to discuss a subcontract which would put them in compliance with the city's exclusive franchise. Ridwell did not do this. In response to what is before you today, the additional recycling collection license program, Republic Services believes this new license program rewards Ridwell for violating the city's regulations and encourages others to do the same. In terms of the program's proposed fee structure, Republic Services supports option B 5% on gross revenue. This is in alignment with Council's desire to have a level playing field for all interested parties. Option A rewards Ridwell and would unfairly punish their competition. Please keep in mind, Ridwell has had an over 4-year head start on anyone who would like to participate in the additional recycling license program. There is good news regarding recycling in Oregon. The Recycling Modernization Act expands curbside recycling and will increase the opportunities for difficult-to-recycle material collection. The RMA is designed to improve public trust in the recycling system by requiring the material to go to a permitted or certified responsible end market as determined by DEQ. Only materials that have existing responsible end markets were included in the RMA. In other words, if it was not included, DEQ was not able to find a responsible end market. The RMA applies pressure to producers to improve their products and the potential for recycling in the future. Republic Services recognizes the community of Lake Oswego has a passion for recycling and cares about the environment. We share the same passion for sustainable recycling practices. We are excited about the implementation of the RMA, which goes into effect in July of this year, and we look forward to making recycling of difficult materials more accessible, equitable, and affordable to all Lake Oswego businesses and residents. We thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to continuing to service Lake Oswego.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Appreciate your comments. Taylor Lowen. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Taylor Lowen, and I am the Regional Operations Director at Ridwell, located in the Portland area. It's great to be back here to again express our strong support for the new permit for supplemental recycling services under development by staff, and to make myself available for any questions that might come up during today's discussion. I would like to thank the staff for their work on the proposed permit before you this afternoon, particularly the constructive engagement with multiple stakeholders, including Ridwell and Republic Services. We believe the result of that work has been to develop an approach that will successfully encourage residents to reduce waste by providing them with multiple options for supplemental recycling services and with all the appropriate regulatory oversight. On the open question in the draft permit regarding the permit fees, I did want to quickly express Ridwell's support for a flat permit at the level proposed by staff. We believe this amount appropriately creates a level playing field for everyone and is set at a level that will not discourage legitimate additional providers that may want to provide service in the future. In fact, our experience supports this fact. We are required to hold this type of license in 17 other jurisdictions where we operate, and none of these license fees are based on a percentage of revenue. If a fee is required, it is based off a flat rate. On the other hand, a fee set at a 5% of gross receipts would be equal to several $1,000s per year, even for a business like ours serving only a few hundred households in the community. This amount would far exceed the city's cost for administrating the permit and would very likely force us to raise prices for Lake Oswego residents to cover this type of significant new cost. We again would like to thank you and the staff for the hard work and encourage you to continue to move this new permit forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have this afternoon or at a later date. And thank you again for the time today. We look forward to a long and productive relationship with the City of Lake Oswego.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Okay, is there anyone else here to provide public comment? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And we are going to move on to the consent agenda. We have items 5.1, which is accepts the 2024 City Council Goals Fourth Quarter Update. Item 5.2, which approves the facility use agreement for community-supported agriculture at Luscher Farm. And item 5.3, which is Ordinance 2955. This is an ordinance implementing Measure 3-618 by amending the Charter, Chapter 10, and authorizing the city manager to execute easements. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, motion made by Councilor Raff and seconded by Councilor Mboop. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, motion passes 7-0. We also have an item for councilor consideration only. This is Resolution 25-02. It's a resolution of the City Councilors of the City of Lake Oswego approving an appointment of an alternate to the Parks, Recreation, Natural Resource, Advisory Board and to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 25-02?
Move to adopt Resolution 2502.
All right, motion made by Councilor Mboop, seconded by Councilor Corrigan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 6-0, Mayor abstaining. All right, moving on to council business. We have item 8.1. Everyone should have on their table here a letter and received it beforehand that the team drafted regarding the supportive housing services measure. This is in response to the presentation we received at our last meeting from Councilor Lewis from Metro, and we drafted this letter trying to capture the essence of that conversation. Does anyone have any feedback on the letter, or just trying to get a sense if you all feel good about sending this? Councilor Afghan. Oh, yes. Perfect. Okay. Good.
It was a well-written letter, Mr. Mayor, and it was very objective as to what are the things we would want to see in order to fully support the plan. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you all for the good discussion at the last meeting as well. Okay, we'll get this sent off. Thanks to the team. Thanks to City Manager and Madison for helping massage my initial draft. Needed a lot of massaging. A lot of bumps. A lot of bumps. Till the 11th hour. All right, next item on the agenda, item 9.1, we're going to have a few study sessions tonight. We're going to start with a study session on the additional recycling collection service licensing program. We invite Ms. Watson forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Amanda Watson. I'm the City's Sustainability Program Manager, and I'm here to talk to you about a proposal for an additional recycling collection services license program. For some background, this is a continuation of a discussion that we started in July of 2024. As you all know, Republic Services has an exclusive franchise in Lake Oswego for the collection of solid waste and recyclable materials. And this question has come before you because there are several companies that offer services to collect difficult to recycle materials from households. These include Ridwell, which began operating in Lake Oswego around 2021, potentially before my time at the city, but in violation of the city's franchise agreement. And so this is why the question came before you. Republic Services also has a similar program collecting difficult to recycle materials from households, but does not currently offer it in Lake Oswego because they would need authorization from the City Council to do so. Back in July, City Council, you all directed staff to develop a license program to regulate these types of services, to provide the option for residents to elect to pay for collection of reusable or difficult to recycle materials from their homes. So what I wanted to walk you through today is to outline the proposed license program for your feedback and highlight a few particular elements of the program that we particularly appreciate your input on. So the license program elements that you have in your council packet and that I'll walk through today are just some basic definitions, scope of the program, what it looks like for companies to apply, the license fee, which will be the main kind of question I would like City Council's input on is the approach to the fee, reporting requirements for companies, operating standards and insurance requirements, and then enforcement and penalties. So that's kind of the outline of what the program looks like. Just starting with definitions, I don't need to read through them all here, but just the gist of this. Essentially, this is defining the services that are covered by our license program in reference to both the city's solid waste franchise, so the work that Republic Services does to collect garbage, recycling, and yard debris, and state laws. So you'll see reference, for example, to the uniform statewide collection list in these definitions. This is the Recycling Modernization Act language, as you heard in public comment earlier, statewide changes to our recycling program. So these definitions are specific enough to talk about what the types of materials that are allowed to be collected through these programs in reference to those state laws, flexible as state laws or lists may change in the future. So just a little bit of context. It's a little bit of a clunky name, but we're calling this additional recycling collection service is the service that we're talking about. So it's in addition to the everyday commingled recycling collection that is governed by our franchise agreement. So the scope of this program, fairly simple. So any company that wants to provide these additional recycling collection services, so to collect this specified list of difficult to recycle or reusable materials in Lake Oswego, needs to have a license. That license we're proposing would be an annual renewal, like the city's business license. In addition, these license holders need to also have a Lake Oswego business license. There would be biannual reporting on the types and amounts of materials collected through these services, facilities where the materials are processed for either reuse or recycling, the number of Lake Oswego customers served, and the number and types of vehicles each company uses for collection in Lake Oswego. And the reason and why this information would be collected by the city would be both to help ensure transparency for customers, that the collected materials are reused or recycled as advertised as they intended, and for the city to understand the impacts of these services on city roads and traffic. So that's kind of why this particular set of information. Proposed operating standards. As much as possible, the proposed standards align with the applicable requirements that are in a solid waste management ordinance. So things like we want to make sure that as collection trucks move around town, they're not spilling materials, they're not blocking streets and sidewalks. They're collecting only materials on the approved list, right? So this is in reference to the fact that we have an exclusive franchise agreement, so we need to be specific about the types of materials that these licensed companies can collect from households, and then that materials that are collected can't be thrown away as garbage. The one caveat here is that this wouldn't prevent companies from, if they collect materials from a household and there's contamination, right? Say they're collecting plastic bags, but someone throws in something that is not the right type of plastic bag, companies could still dispose of that. This operating standard is just, again, to make sure that that companies that come into this market are not collecting an item that they say is recyclable or reused, and it's always thrown into the landfill. This is something we have in our franchise agreement as well, and it's broader than, it's not limiting companies from dealing with contamination that happens in collection services. The proposed enforcement and penalties, not on the screen here, but in the packet, they align with the business license program. So we propose that the presumptive fee for violations is the same as the city's business license program, and that violations are civil penalties, just like we do for most other city codes. Keeping this as simple as possible. Essentially, the kind of design principles behind this program here are what we heard from City Council in July, the desire to have a level playing field as much as possible among companies that are providing this service in Lake Oswego, and also to streamline and reduce kind of administrative burden on city staff, right? So we want to provide a solid regulatory structure, but one that's not onerous either for the city or companies as much as possible. The next kind of area to talk about here is license fee. So there are two potential approaches for a license fee for this program. The initial staff recommendation was a flat fee based on feedback from companies we worked with. So I had a couple rounds of drafts with both Republic Services and Ridwell to get input from companies providing the service. We also proposed a revenue-based fee based on that feedback. So the flat fee is based on an estimate of staff costs to administer the program, less the amount of a business license, which companies would also have to have. So $450 would be the proposed initial application fee, $250 for subsequent annual renewals. The revenue-based fee, the proposed 5%, is what we have in our solid waste franchise fee, or solid waste franchise, excuse me, is a 5% fee on gross revenue from operations within Lake Oswego. So that's where that proposed 5% comes from. In developing the proposal, we looked into several other options for a license fee, right? So the revenue-based fee, and then a number of the other jurisdictions, either where Ridwell told us they had a license for us to kind of get a sense of what other structures are out there, or other local governments in Oregon, kind of looking at what are different license programs that regulate solid waste collection. And, you know, in a scan of those other programs, the majority had, well, I would say half had a flat fee of some sort. Only 2 out of the 12 that I looked at had a gross revenue-based fee, and then there were many that had vehicle fees that was connected to state laws, and some had tonnage fees. Again, we landed on the flat fee because it would cover, you know, the idea with this program is to regulate the business, but not necessarily to generate revenue, so it would cover the cost of administering the program, and would be administratively straightforward because it aligns with our business license fee approach. I guess I will leave it at that. I have a slide too that shows, if folks are interested, it's very small, but that shows some of these other, all the jurisdictions, programs that I looked at and the kind of level of fees, but maybe I will leave it at that, and I can run through that if there's interest in kind of additional detail there. That's really all I have for you, so I'd love to hear if you have any questions or feedback on any of the aspects of the license program, but in particular on that question about how to set the license fee.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. What if Republic were to expand into this, like we learned about the last time, like Recycling Plus, I think was would the revenues they generate from Recycling Plus be subject to their 5%? Franchise fee?
Not the franchise fee, no. It would be totally separate. So the idea that we're having this license program is that type of business, that line of business is not part of our franchise agreement. So they would be subject to a fee structure under the license program for Recycle Plus.
Whatever we do here. Oh. And then is this license the business license? They don't also need a business license, and
we're proposing that they would, and so that's the level of the fee is taking into account the new business license fee amount. So, you know, when we did the staff calculation, it was closer to $900, and so I subtracted the $450 for the highest level of the business license fee to kind of get us at this $450 for the initial application. The idea being, yeah, that other businesses would have to have the business license fee. So this is additional based on the type of service, right? So the kind of use of the roads and the fact that we need to create a new license program just for this specific type of business.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And we take note that Redwall doesn't have a business license even now.
Correct.
That's not a good look, honestly, at all. Great. I mean, it's coming up here at like city council meeting, you're coming in here without a business license.
I'm not sure we would have issued a business license to them since we thought at the time they were operating illegally.
Not good. Just all around. It's bad look all around. Not great. Okay, Councilor Boo.
Yeah, I think when we get out of this meeting, they're gonna get a business license. Is it right?
Well, you're not adopting the program tonight. You're just giving us direction so we can come back to you with.
No, yeah, and
Again, I don't think at this point in time we think that there's any path for them to operate legally. We're trying to create a path for them to operate legally. So, I mean, we can't really issue a business license to a business that's out of compliance with the code.
Yeah, but we're also not
We're in this.
enforcing.
I think we're all aware, and I think Republic's pointed it out that we're in this sort of this dilemma, this catch-22 of they can't get a business license, but yet they have 1,200 customers. And so, and the people we'd be punishing if we shut them down are the 1,200 customers, right? So I think that's why we need your feedback so that they can legalize their operations.
No, I continue. Personally, for me, based on our population that are writing to us, most of the people want Readwell to operate, and the people we represent, and for that reason, I think they should operate, but they should be on compliance before doing anything. But what I don't understand, I don't know if I heard very well, are you subtracting the fee from the license, or the people will pay license fee, but then pay the business fee?
The latter. So they would pay for a business fee separately, and then they would pay for this license fee. Just in the proposed amount here, 450, takes into account that there would be, it's lower than if they would not have had to have a business license. So separate applications. They have to both pay for and apply for a business license and pay for and apply for an additional recycling collection services license. Yeah.
Fair, yeah, they should, yeah. I thought you would say they pay one fee and not the other, okay. Yeah, but,
Verifying,
yeah,
yeah.
like the mayor said, it does not look good to operate in our city without a license. And I think, we have to be very clear for all other businesses that you are in our city, you have to be licensed. And that's unfair for the other businesses. And, and businesses like that should, we should find them. We should have something, so that it doesn't repeat, because it's rewarding also like bad behavior. I don't know how it happens, that we just have someone is operating without a license. It can happen because sometimes people don't know, it can be that, but
Well, and there's innovations. I guess that's the other thing, is government's constantly behind innovations in the economy. When Airbnb started, no one was charging them business license fees, right? It's very similar. When Uber and Lyft started, they didn't fall into anybody's taxi cab regulations. So the business, the economy, right now, I think we've talked about before, we have folks rent their dining rooms for conferences and their backyards for events, and there's nowhere in our codes where we have anticipated those kinds of innovations in the economy. So I don't think, I just wouldn't cast this in the good actor, bad actor category. I would just say it's taken us this long to catch up with what's really happening in this marketplace. This is a new marketplace. We have a business that's figured out how to capture it. And rather than trying to stop them or stifle them or make them go away, we're trying to find a way to help them operate legally. The other thing Amanda said that I think is really important for us to remember about this license is what this will do is require some reporting, so some transparency for the customer to know that the stuff they're putting in that cute box is actually going to end markets that are responsible.
Right.
So I think this ends up being a win-win for the city, Ridwell, and for our residents.
no, and I agree with you. Like, I'm not sympathetic of Ridwell, I'm sympathetic of our constituents who want and who are pledging for you. But it does not justify, like, you are doing business, even if it's a business coming from Mars, you have to have a license. Like, be it a small or, because a business is a business, whether it's a new concept or an old concept. You come in a city, you have to have the license.
Yeah, the business license ordinance doesn't
Yes.
say unless you have something that's illegal, but we really like the idea and you can just operate without a business license.
Yeah.
I just think we can do both. We can work with Ridwell and we can bring them into compliance and retroactively collect the business license fee during the time or fine them, just follow the code.
Yeah.
I mean, all we're asking is that we follow the code, and I think that that would be fair, Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Watson, I have a question for you. Whether we go flat fee or revenue-based fee, what is that duration that we have to stay within that decision? Is this for 1 year or 5 years or 10 years that we're making a decision on?
I think that's up to the city council, right? So
Okay.
the proposal is that this is an annual fee, or sorry, excuse me, an annual license renewal process. And so like any program, the city council, if you decide to change, and we could bring it back in the future. I think for regulatory certainty, it's always nice to have something stick for longer, but.
Well, you update your
Yeah.
fees and charges citywide every year, the master fees and charges you
Understood.
adopt every year. So you could amend it every single year if you wanted to as a council.
Understood. Thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, I don't have any more question for Ms. Watson.
What do you
but
think about the fee?
The fee, I think as City Manager Bennett said, we want to ignite and promote innovation. I think it needs to be more than $450 for initial application because we want to make sure all of those indicators that Ms. Watson was talking about those are done correctly with cities' involvement. And all the information we get, at least the first year, we do have verification that all of this recycling stuff do happen. That's the first year. The subsequent years, then it can be half as much. So I think it's going to take us more than $450 the first year to set the program up correctly. So I'm for the flat fee. And also on the license, business license, we do need to go retro and say you have been working this many years, and the license based on the codes have add up to this much, this many dollars. So I also agree with City Manager Bennett that this is sort of like catch-22. We can't acknowledge them as a business. We can't give them a business license, but we're trying to. So retrospectively, we can go back and say, you've been operating for 5 years or 3 years and collect that money. Thank you.
But can we legally do that?
Councilor Windland. Thank you, Councilor Afghan.
Just a couple questions. How many people participate in the Ridwell program? I know that they say you have 1,200, but she said they have a few hundred.
That's a good question. From their website, it's just over 1,200. I was told 800
Right.
from Ridwell, in the summer in July. So somewhere in that range,
Okay.
from my understanding.
So are there any other competitors to Ridwell, and are they viable competitors?
Yes, so there are a number of established waste haulers that now provide the Recycle Plus program, particularly in other jurisdictions where they require the haulers to provide the service instead of enabling companies like Ridwell to do so. So in Washington County, I believe it's Waste Management, other larger haulers have a Recycle Plus program. I don't know if it's likely that they would expand to Lake Oswego, right? Those are haulers providing that program in jurisdictions where they have a franchise agreement. But there are some other companies that provide it. There is a company called James Recycling that currently has collection events for a similar set of difficult to recycle materials, but from my understanding, either do not have a door-to-store collection service. It's just for people to drop off things. Either don't have it at all, or it's very, very small scale. So currently, from staff understanding, it's just Ridwell and Recycle Plus provided by Republic Services would be the two, ready-to-go competitors in our city.
Okay. Well, I like a level playing field. I think the real thing is it's kind of a catch-22. We have customers that are actually paying to recycle instead of throwing stuff in the trash can, which then becomes a problem for Republic. And so those that are paying a fee every month, it's an optional thing to be good citizens and recycle stuff that shouldn't be thrown in the trash, or to be just good because it can be recycled. So I look at if your numbers are right between the 8,000, 13,000, you're doing about $160,000 to $260,000 in revenue as far as Ridwell is concerned out of the customers if they in an annual basis. I don't necessarily like the 5% franchise fee if that's not what we're. Nobody else really is charging that. I do think that the annual fee, for you to say that that is based on staff time to develop and administer the program, then we're not paying you enough. Or you're so extremely efficient that I think that's, and you're worth a lot more than that. So I think your numbers are perhaps a little low. On the other hand, I don't want it to be to where the customer then is charged so much that they stop the program. I think it's, it's one of those things where you want to have things up. And I also don't want them to stop the program and start putting it into Republic's garbage, because then they're going to have to haul for more. The one thing that I do think about the competition part is that we have a contract with Republic that we come in and they bid on, and they negotiate, and they provide financials, and they say, this is how we're doing, and we have a mutual relationship that we say that you're going to make X amount of a return so that you have a chance to replace the equipment and make a profit, and we're all happy. We also drive the price down as best we can. And so what I don't know is, are we competitive? Is Ridwell competitive for a different service that we could be providing that would accomplish the same goals? And I know that's not exactly what you're asking as far as a license fee and so on, but I think that's one of the, from my perspective, are we offering because once you give the license and Ridwell has it, then no one else can enter the market. Is that correct?
No.
Anyone else can?
Yep, the idea is that any company that provides this particular type of service as defined in this program can apply for and receive a license to do so legally.
Okay, so they could be competitive and offer it at a smaller.
yeah.
So, okay, well, if that's the case, then you want to make it as competitive as you can. I just think the 450 is too low. I just, from the standpoint, you're way too valuable. And I also know that our city manager says you deal with a lot of calls and different things for our recycling, garbage, business, everyone. So I guess that would be my one input. And it's, and from the standpoint, if you want to have the initial application fee, I think $250 for renewal is way too low, especially with $160,000 to $260,000 in income. Maybe not 5% of gross revenue, but
Yeah.
I think you certainly could be in the several hundred or several $1,000 fee, and that would not impact their rates to their people. So anyway, just food for thought.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman.
Sorry.
Please, yeah.
I was just going to say, I can provide some additional context. Sorry, this is very small, but just looking at a range of the fees, many of these programs are ones that Ridwell told me they're subject to in the cities they operate in. So for example, City of Alameda, California, they have a solid waste and recycling permit. They're paying a flat permit fee of $984, right? So there's a range from $25 a year up to that, to almost $1,000, just to give you a sense of kind of some of the other programs that I looked at. No, not all of these are, many of these are more general, so it's like a commercial collection permit for the city of Portland. That's,
Right.
I feel it's a different type of business, but there's a wide range of flat permit fees that the council could consider.
Right, but I mean, I don't know if these are negotiated rates, if the city
Right.
of Alameda has a specific handling fee for waste that is, I mean, a negotiated rate and so on. So
Yep.
I just look at it as, while these are probably helpful, I think you would have to have the detail to say, is this just a extra fee for anybody to enter, or is this something that's part of the contract within the context of the community at large? And so
Yep, exactly.
that's where I just kind of look at, we need the best optimal recycling, we need the best price, and Lake Oswego needs to offset some of that cost. I think that's the objectives. And we value you, so. And this service, I mean, it's, I know that Republic probably doesn't really want to deal with this stuff. Maybe not, maybe you do. I know that when we went through that discussion before, they could be cohabitators and it would work. So,
Thank you, Councilwoman. That's good points. Councilor Corrigan.
So one thing we know for sure is we have overwhelming support for the type of approach that Ridwell uses. Did it not work? They have proven that they are at the leading edge of solving how to get rid of these odd things. And I think the other thing that we need to realize is that packaging is constantly evolving, you know, and they have a passion and a mission to take care of that. So, and the other thing I'd like us to keep in mind is that there is a sustainability benefit to this too, which is not in dollars and cents. I think the dollars and cents calculations really matter, and we don't want to undervalue the time and the effort that our staff has to put in to make this work. But I would like to see a way to make it work, and I think it should be a flat fee, but it should be a fair flat fee. And I really like the idea that it will be a competitive service, so that if someone else comes in who can do a better job, then that's the way it should work.
I agree with that too, the flat fee. I kind of agree with my colleagues, though, it just feels a little low. Maybe we could, yeah, you agree with that too, Councilor? Okay. Yeah, maybe take another stab at the, but I agree, I mean, we don't want to see the rates, I mean, the whole point of this was to increase competition. And it does seem fair, as long as everyone who's performing this business, including Republic, is paying the flat fee, then it's across the board. I mean, they're not collecting the solid waste, you know, I mean, we do want to keep the cost to folks as low as possible, and anything we put on is gonna, you know, just get passed on to the end user, to the customers, of course.
Well, I'd hope that Ridwell would not pass on a small, I mean, if it's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000
Well,
within
even if
their
they did,
revenue
it's like
frame,
nothing, yeah.
that would not be.
As opposed to the
constituted.
5%, though, you know, they just tack that on the bills.
That would be a big,
Our friends at PG and everyone.
right,
Yeah.
bigger chunk.
Okay,
1%.
so it seems like we're all in favor of the flat fee, but maybe a little, you know, yeah, juice it up a little bit. You know. And,
But we-
and then this
Same
business
with the
license,
renewal.
we got this taken care of.
But Mr. Mayor,
But do we need to put something in the,
yes, that's, yeah.
A lot of businesses that are
Yeah,
existing.
I
that are
mean,
without
we can talk to
licenses.
Ridwell about whether or not they'd be willing to, but I think the question, and you know this conversation's coming, and I know you'll talk about it during goal setting on this weekend, but this question of what do you want us to do about enforcing against folks who don't currently have a business license that need one is an open question for the city. We do some enforcement, but we're not aggressive. We don't take everybody to municipal, because that's where we go, right? If someone doesn't pay their
Well-
business license fee, we don't.
the difference here is it's pretty blatant.
The difference
Very
here
public.
is that what we're doing is we're making it possible for this business to operate legally. So as I say, I think we can talk with them about their willingness to consider this as an option. But this broader question of what you want us to do about enforcing against businesses that have opted not to get a license even though they need one is one we need to take up as part of a different
Right,
project.
but would you agree that there is more work from the city's standpoint of issuing a business license to Ridwell than there is a normal business that really just,
Well, no, the business license will be identical. So this license will be a separate, they'll have two licenses. They'll have a business license and they'll have this
This license.
additional recycling.
recycling.
We were calling it enhanced recycling. I'm having a hard time making the switch over. So they'll have an additional recycling services license that will take us more time the very first year we issue it. I trust that staff has thought about whether 450 covers their actual costs or not, but I hear what you're saying, which is there's probably more than we haven't thought of yet.
Yeah, well, just in general, like, we've been going through this, like, very lengthy process, like, with Ridwell, and all of our businesses add value to the community, and they all pay the licensing fee to cover that cost, whether it's with the planning department or public safety. And so it just seems like a real pass, you know, to just say, well, yeah, for years they don't pay the business license fee, even though we've been going through the most public process we've ever gone through with any business in town to make them legal. That's all we're saying. You know, and if we don't have provisions in the code to handle situations like this, then I think we should look at putting those in. But it seems to me like we have an enforcement fee. I don't see why we would charge it. If they've been operating illegally, even though we're making them legal, tack on the fee. I think we just need to be fair about it. And it's not like some home business that we don't know about. I mean, it's in front of the council.
How about you let me talk to the city attorney about whether we can do that or not?
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
How about
that's
you let
what-
me do the little
Sounds
work?
good.
And as opposed, I understand the moral issue, but what I don't understand
The legal.
is the legal issue.
Yeah, well, we don't have everyone before us on this, on a continual basis in study sessions and everything else. And unfortunately for Ridwell, they are. So now you've got our attention, and we all know very publicly that you don't have a business license, and we are irritated by it.
We have business licenses in every
Yeah, but you've been operating illegally for years, and we all know that. Okay, thank you. It's okay. It's not your turn to speak. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Watt. Do you have everything from
Thank
us you
you.
need?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll
very much.
return with a draft ordinance and proposed license amount.
Thank you.
You don't
Sounds
give
good.
them.
Okay.
They'll come up with a number.
Next item on the agenda, a study session on Parks Plan 2040, project update.
We have to be realistic.
Ms. Haggard.
Okay, good.
Wow, in person. What a treat.
Yes.
Yes.
In the flesh.
You mean the
Yes,
3D
wow.
today?
Very nice.
All right. Good afternoon. Before I hand it over to Matt, I just wanted to reflect really quickly on the conversation that you all had at our last update about whether or not Lake Oswego truly does have the best park and recreation system in all the land. And I think I agree with you that it is truly exceptional. And that leads me to wonder, how did it become this way? And I think that wasn't by accident, but because this community and the city leadership has continued to invest in our park and recreation system year after year and budget cycle after budget cycle. And I'm excited to share with you our ideas for the next 15 years. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and Matt, you can just tell me when you want me to move through the slides.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for having me. Nice to be here, as I said, in the 3D. Usually you see me on the little screen. That screen, I'm pretty big. I can see myself from the little screen. But anyway, good to be here. So we're going to give you an update. These are the topics we're going to cover. We're going to stop along the way at a couple of points and ask you questions, so you're not going to have to listen to me talk for like the whole time before we take a pause and get comments and ask you some questions. So I'll just note that. We'll walk through kind of the update, the system-wide recommendations, and the improvements projects. Then we'll take a pause, and then we'll take those next couple topics, take another pause, and then talk about next steps. So that's what we'll cover today. So we're getting towards the tail end of the process. I won't say too much more about this slide other than we're here to talk to you as we're working on compiling all the work we've been doing over the last year plus into a draft Parks 2040 planning document. So a lot of the substantive work has been done. We have one more meeting with a combined meeting with our CAC and our Parks Board to present that draft plan before we then come to you all again with a plan to propose for adoption, assuming that the Parks Board recommends it for adoption. The other thing, and I'll note this later too, is that there's a system development charge methodology update that's part of this process, and we'll be back with you for a separate study session on that. That will be a separate adoption action. So this really mostly covers the plan itself. One of the things before you that we've actually been working on for a while, but we hadn't presented information about this previously, so we wanted to touch on it today. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to talk about it, are the system-wide recommendations. So we will go into more detail on the specific project recommendations. These system-wide recommendations are more about kind of how you operate and maintain your system, how you update planning processes, how you kind of interface with the community, et cetera. So they are organized around a set of broad goals, and then there are quite a few recommendations under each goal. And we've had a lot of discussion with the CAC, the Parks Board, staff around these system-wide recommendations, and they do then also inform those capital improvement projects, but they also kind of go beyond just capital improvements to how you maintain and operate the system as well. So next one. So again, these are organized around 7 goals. I'll just kind of note these briefly. Access to essential services, we've kind of defined those before in previous meetings. How you invest in your facilities, serving people of all ages and all abilities, making sure you're maintaining and operating your facilities to a high level and to the kind of the standards that your community has seen and expects, making sure you're doing that in a sustainable and resilient manner, and that you're connecting the different elements of your system, and then, of course, working closely with the community and with your partners kind of throughout that process. So those are sort of the broad goals, and then again, there's, I don't know, anywhere from like 6 to a dozen actions under each of those. So that's how that's organized. So I'm going to spend the next, it's going to be a number of slides, apologies, but talking about the capital improvement project list. So this is sort of a diagram that shows you all the different types of information that went into and informed this list of projects. And I'll say more about the projects and a little bit about the prioritization of them in a moment. But you've done a lot of good work leading up to this planning process. So there were all kinds of earlier planning documents and processes and recommendations that came into this, along with all the community engagement that we've been conducting as part of this process, the meetings with the Parks Board, the CAC, you all, other community groups and community members in this process. So this is just kind of all the things that went into those capital improvement project recommendations. And they have been categorized into 4 different types of projects. So reinvestment, that's really maintaining what you already have. And this was something we heard throughout the process from members of the community. Hey, before you go out and build new things, let's make sure we take good care of what we have. Keep those things in good condition, replace them in kind where that makes sense. But that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities to expand or enhance or build additional facilities or do things that provide new capacity. So that could be expanding play areas or picnic facilities. It could be replacing grass fields with artificial turf to expand the playing time that's available on those. So there's a lot of things like that. And then access. This is both improving accessibility within your parks and recreation facilities, as well as access to them. Now, some of the improvements to get people from their neighborhoods to the parks, those don't fall directly into the purview of the Parks Department. They're things that your public works folks work on, but there needs to be coordination in that and sort of putting an emphasis on access improvements that help people get to parks is important. We've heard that a lot during the process. And then, of course, enhancing natural areas and providing opportunities to connect with nature has been a priority among folks we've heard from during this process as well. So just kind of some quick stats on these. So 124 projects in this list, that's a lot of them. 41 of those are those reinvestment projects. So those are, again, maintaining what you have. I won't read all these numbers, but I will note that for the nature projects, there's just one that falls directly under that category, but there are projects, 23 projects within natural areas. And so a lot of those are more about accessibility improvements or doing other things that do enhance people's ability to connect with nature, but the primary kind of project wasn't restoring a natural area, and so they didn't end up in the nature category, but they contribute to people's ability to access nature and enjoy nature in Lake Oswego and enhance those areas. So I just want to note that. Yeah, we'll keep going. We'll talk some more. This map, I won't go into this in detail, but it just gives you a sense really that these projects are distributed throughout the community. You see projects in virtually every park and every neighborhood within the city, and you see a lot of different kinds of projects spread throughout the city. So those symbols give you a sense of the types of projects in different locations, either in different neighborhoods or in different parks. So that's kind of what this map is showing you. Next one, so we went through a process of prioritizing those 124 projects. This was a 2-step process. We had a set of evaluation criteria that were identified, and we discussed those with the CAC and the Parks Board, as well as via a community survey to get a sense of which of these criteria are most important or should have the most weight as we prioritize these projects. So we then weighted those criteria based on what we heard. We then used those to identify relative priorities, low, medium, and high. But then we also made some targeted adjustments to priorities based on a variety of factors. There's the next slide, I'll talk about that a little bit more, and ultimately identified a proposed timeline, near term, midterm, and long term for each project. And we'll talk about that in the next slide or two. So really, again, a number of things that we used in terms of those targeted adjustments. I will not read all these things, but I'll note a couple of things in particular. Again, you've got a number of planning documents and things you're already doing. You have a replacement schedule for certain things to replace as they age, playground equipment, et cetera. you are legally required to meet ADA access requirements in certain facilities. So there are some things that you already had on a schedule. We kept those on the schedule in terms of where these landed in terms of the near, medium, and long-term projects. So that was really important. Things that the City Council had identified as a priority, those if they weren't already rated as a high priority, that was important in terms of where we put them in the timeline. And then again, places where you have funding already to do something, we might have moved those around or bumped them up in priority. But there's still time to kind of make changes to this. So if you all have thoughts today about any projects that you think should be shifted in terms of the priority of implementation, we want to hear that. We also want to note that we are concurrently conducting an athletic field study as part of this process. We're looking at both in terms of, the fields that are out there and the provide capacity. We're looking at both city and school district facilities. The recommendations will be related to your facilities, the city facilities, but we are taking both types of facilities into account. That is ongoing. We got started on that a little late, so we're expecting to have a draft report to staff by about the first week in March. So we will have an opportunity to potentially make some changes to the recommendations related to athletic fields to incorporate the results of that study. So there's still some time to do that as well. So I did just want to mention those couple of things in terms of ability to tweak some of the recommendations here. All right, just again, a few more statistics. So the way these projects shook out in terms of the timeline, we've got just under 30 of them show up under the near-term projects, 46 midterm, 49 long-term, so those are pretty evenly distributed. I will say the sort of cost of projects is weighted a little heavier towards the long-term. I think that makes sense in terms of your ability to plan for particularly some of the larger projects and build up enough revenue to complete some of those projects, and also to potentially look at other revenue sources that you may or may not have in place now, and we'll talk about that towards the end of this presentation as well. But that gives you a sense of kind of how the projects are distributed in terms of time and cost. So I'm not going to list or walk through every one of these projects, but we are going to show you the lists of all the projects that occur in the near term, the midterm, and the long term. And I will just kind of note a few things about them, but I won't talk about every one of them mercifully for y'all. So I will note that a lot of the projects in the near term are to do things like replace playgrounds where they're kind of coming up to the end of their useful life, or where there are safety or operational issues that need to be addressed, making ADA improvements. I'll also note that where we had projects in the list that were, say, replace a playground, maybe there was an ADA project that it might not have scored as well with all those criteria, but the city staff says, hey, we can do those things at the same time. We put those together and we bump the timing of those up in some cases. So a lot of these projects in this phase are related to those things, and a lot of them are things that were kind of already on the books. They were already in your plans and your schedules.
I also want to share a fun fact, which is that of our 15 playgrounds in Lake Oswego, 10 of those were built before 2010, and so all of those are going to most likely need to be replaced during the planning period for this project. So we have a lot coming up.
Awesome. So I think we can kind of hit the next slide, see if there's anything else we want to highlight here. I think one of the things to highlight here is near the bottom of the list, but it's not at the bottom of the list, but the pickleball courts project. So again, that was identified by council as a high priority issue to address. So that's one of the near-term projects, is to design and construct 4 to 8 new outdoor pickleball courts. And then there's some system-wide projects here too that need to be done at kind of parks across the city, and again, are already identified as being implemented kind of in the nearer term. So replacing drinking fountains as well as bollards. Midterm projects, I'll kind of note a few of these maybe now, and you'll see them show up on the slides as we go through. But there's a couple of significant improvements in neighborhood parks here. So I think they're on the next slide, but the Free Ponds Park improvements, that's a major park improvement, major renovation. And Pilkington too. Pilkington is an area that we had identified as an underserved area. There's a park there. It's a lovely park, but it lacks certain types of amenities that are needed by folks who live in that vicinity. So that's a pretty significant project, but it's not one that can probably be completed in the short term, and that's why it's a medium-term project. You'll also see improvements to the Lake Oswego Swim Park here, another kind of notable project. And then on the next slide, a couple of things I'll also note are some projects where there's not a specific site identified, and so it's going to take some time to do some analysis of what is the appropriate site for this project and where should it take place, and that's why these are medium-term projects. So things like a new needed park in the south or western part of Lake Oswego, new splash pad or water feature, at likely an existing park in Lake Oswego, as well as sand volleyball court. So those were all projects that sort of scored well, but we didn't think it could be completed in this amount of time. Yes. Sure.
Back one more. Back one more. Back one more. So here. So Lake Oswego Swim Park, near-term project. You say park entry, access, and ADA improvements. What do you mean by access?
So there was a project identified in the ADA transition plan that was kind of vague. It just said it's really hard for people who maybe like use mobility devices, for example, to like get down to the swim park, just because there's no accessible parking.
I thought it was a different kind of access.
Oh, no, at the existing
No,
swim park.
it's into the park. Yeah, not into the water. Yeah, thank you.
You can go forward now 5 pages.
All right, five or six slides,
5 or 6
wherever we
slides.
were. No worries. All right. I think we're probably up to, here, and then we can probably just go to the next one because I talked about that one. And then in terms of kind of long-term projects, again, I'll say kind of a few words about this and note a couple of specific projects. But there's a number of projects here that, again, are either things that just schedule-wise we don't think need to be happening until the long term. Some of these are newer parks where things are going to need to be replaced within the lifespan of this plan because it's a 15-year plan. So you'll see a few things like that, or where, again, the playground was built more recently, so it's not going to need to be replaced for a certain period of time. And then there's some things like Foothills Park, the park expansion, that's going to take time for kind of disposition around the wastewater treatment plant. So it's not sort of going to be ripe for moving forward with probably until this period of time. And then the same thing I would say with some of the Luscher Park, which I think is on the next one, and natural area improvements. There's a number of things at that park that really can't be done for a while, including until it's in the UGB. So some of those projects that require that are farther out in the future. So I'll note that. And so those are all the ones I'll kind of note there, unless Kira has any others. Nope, good one. Okay, so that was my very quick overview of 124 projects that are in this parks plan and kind of how we got to that point. So I'm going to take a pause, see if you have any comments either on what you read about the system-wide improvements and what I described, as well as any comments, questions, or suggested shifts in timing of any of the projects that are in the prioritized list of improvements. And I will say that we asked our CAC and Parks Board the same thing when we met with them, and they did move one project, but they didn't move too many. So, so I will take a pause.
Thank you for going over this with us. Could you help understand how, like I see, we got the short term, the midterm, and the long term, but then these priorities, and I would think that most of the lower priority projects would be out in the longer term, but they're just like kind of all over the place. So how You know,
We-
how does that square?
We kind of grappled with that as well, because originally when we started going through the prioritization process, I think we thought, okay, well, we'll do the high priority ones first, and then the medium priority ones in the midterm, and the low priority ones in the long term. But when we actually looked at that list, we saw all these things in the high priorities that we couldn't accomplish in the near term. It's just not feasible. For example, the Foothills Park expansion. So that's where the sort of targeted adjustments came in. You know, some of the accessibility improvements didn't get ranked super highly according to our kind of community survey results, but we said, well, there's an opportunity to accomplish those if we're already going in and doing some other improvements at this existing park. So we sort of paired those together, and those kind of moved up in the timeline. So I tried to put in it's not on our slides, but in the descriptions in your packet, kind of some of the reasoning for when we made shifts. But our initial sorting was like high priority stuff, try to do that sooner, medium goes in the midterm, and low in the kind of longer term. But you know, some things need to be done sooner simply because the equipment is aging and just needs to be replaced in the near term. And the community doesn't find those to be super, super invigorating, exciting projects, but that's kind of stuff that needs to be done anyway, so it ended up in the near-term bucket.
Yeah, and I'll just say, add a couple quick things. One is that those initial priorities came out of this kind of numerical ranking that we did. So we had like 4, I think, different criteria. We came up with a system to rate them, then we ranked them, then we added those, and we weighted the criteria based, again, on what we heard from those different groups. And then we added up all the scores, and that kind of spit out these priorities. And the initial thought, as Kira said, was, okay, those priorities will reflect, you know, we'll translate them directly to when those projects are implemented. But again, there were some really good reasons for moving some of those things around. Because those criteria and kind of numerical rankings didn't tell the whole story. They didn't really necessarily say, oh, look, there's some playgrounds here that really need to be replaced in terms of their condition, their age, et cetera. And hey, we can do some of these things at the same time, and then make more improvements in different types of improvements in the near term, but things that are still important. So Kira gave a better explanation, but that's some other things.
Well, we wanted to leave them in the you know, project materials, because for transparency, I wanted to be kind of a pure priority score, but then be able to tell the story of, well, here's why we decided to do this one sooner, or why this one can't happen until 10 years from now, something like that.
I guess, I mean, one thing, I mean, obvious thing that comes to mind is just, you know, what resources people use the most, you know? And so, I mean, just some things that stand out to me are like, you know, see something like, you know, the Iron Mountain Park Trail, which is like well used by folks, and I compare that with like the Lake Oswego Swim Park, which is only open like what, 2% of the year, you know, or something. So like, how would that?
Obviously, you don't swim.
Yeah. 4/12 of the year.
You know, yeah, you know, from noon to 2 p.m. or something like that. I mean, so it just seems like, why would that be a higher priority than, I mean, honestly, you could take anything off of this midterm list that seems like these are all much more well-used resources within the community. Mm-hmm. So that would just be one thing. And then the other is, you know, we hear so much feedback from the community in goal, and a lot of it was around, you know, pickleball specifically, but like stepping back a little bit from that, it was like this need for the connection. You know, we have a lot of older residents, and we didn't hear so much on this regard from the younger residents, but it is with younger residents too, this real need for connection. The city manager and I were talking about this earlier, like this crisis of isolation, you know, that we're facing as a society. And I would love to see built into this park plan, mm-hmm. how these different projects, and I know a lot of it's in the programming, this is a capital improvement list, not a programming list, but, you know, how these projects connect our residents and provide them opportunities to connect with one another and get out. And because, I mean, that's what's really leading to a healthy life. And these are very detrimental, you know, consequences when people are forced to be isolated. Mm-hmm. And it's other work that we're doing too around pathways and connectivity in the city. But things that really bring, because a lot of, obviously walking around, that can be kind of a solitary activity too. But, you know, these parks really provide opportunities. And that's what I heard from residents. And a lot of them, for them, it's pickleball, like it's what brings them together, but it's other things too. Yeah. And they're just so hungry for that. And so that, I mean, I think we should move those things to the top of the list if there's a way to like put that into this matrix.
Yeah. I think maybe places where people get together, like picnic shelters, other sort of like community gathering spaces is one way you could try to address that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even the playgrounds too is a great, place to start, because that always seems to, the kids get together and then the adults talk, and all that. Councilor Afghan.
Very informative information. How long do we have to address the ADAs across all of our parks?
I don't believe that there's like a sunset clause in the plan.
Okay.
They had made some recommendations about tiers for which parks should be addressed first, and we tried to reflect that in our priorities as far as they are in this. Like, I think there were 3 tiers of improvements, and focusing on ones that serve the most people, kind of as the mayor said, our regional and community parks, we're trying to prioritize ADA improvements in those first, and then, carrying down the line to some of our smaller neighborhood parks.
Yeah, but
Go ahead.
we did think it was important where we could combine those improvements with other improvements in the same park to kind of make those, sooner rather than later. So that was part of the, and also where in some cases, some of them maybe have been scheduled. So again, reflect, what's already being planned.
Mr. Mayor brought up what was going through my mind is that how were these projects tied back to the goals that we set up, the connectivity, sustainability, and those kind of things, and did they play in this prioritization?
Yes. So I'll say that one of the prioritization criteria we had was, do they further goals in the parks plan, and how many goals do they further? So we noted which ones furthered which goals. We added them up, and so if they furthered, 0 to 2 goals, they got 1 rating, and on up to, I think the max was 7, right? So that was one of the criteria that we used to in that matrix process. So that was one, and then there was one of them had to do with, are they meeting an essential park need in a given location? Are they meeting a need in an underserved area based on the earlier mapping analysis work we did? So I'm trying to remember the other ones. Yeah. So yes, that was directly included as one of the criteria that we looked at.
All right.
Yeah.
One other thing is going through my mind that I'm going to try to provide some context. As we spend more money, how does that impact our maintenance cost? And where is the crossing point when we have spent so much money now we cannot maintain it? I did notice that the priorities were on ADA and also maintenance, so that makes sense. But I need you guys to keep this in mind, that we don't want to spend, and all of a sudden not be able to maintain. So I noticed that we had $8 million in maintenance cost. And as I ran my numbers, priority 1, the first 5 years would be about $2.5 million a year. Additional cost, this is not maintenance. And then the next 5 years is $5.5 million a year. The last 5 years is $8 million a year. So keeps going up, and I don't know how this is all going to come together from the financial point of view and how we're going to be able to afford this. Having said this, we have to do maintenance. We have to keep upgrading our ADAs, and we have to figure out how to do pickleball in this town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. Do we, just real quick, I mean, in that, the list of, the project list, do we have a number on how many of those can be SDC funded, or?
We're working on that right now with our SDC subconsultant.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Also this
Yeah,
SDC.
I'll say based on the last conversation we had with her, quite a few, not all of them, but there are a fair number that likely will be able to take advantage of that at some level. So that's one of the things we'll need to figure out and are working on, is which ones are SDC eligible in terms of, are they expanding capacity, and then how much of that can we attribute to new growth Those are kind of the two things we end up looking at to come up with this portion of this project is SDC eligible. So that's the process we're working through right now with our SDC consultant.
And after we get done with these questions, are we talking about the finance? Okay.
Yes, we had implementation strategies and funding strategies. I've still got some slides to present to you on that. when
Okay,
we,
good.
Yeah, finish talking about the projects.
Councilor Wu, thank
I
you.
was gonna ask for funding, but my other question is, like, following up with what Mr. Mayor said, and it's, to be blunt, we have to bring back pickleball in one of our park. It's like pickleball, it has, because, like, I always remember when I went to represent the mayor during COVID, when a 100-year-old man named George, who, you know, even they were the police, they were all celebrating his 100-year, he was playing pickleball. And it means it's something that's very important. And when we're talking about access, even though in Lake Oswego we will continue to talk about DEI, it's important. No one can take it from this city. Important. I heard something about it yesterday, but so DEI is very important for us. And if we want that component, we cannot exclude hundreds or thousands of people from Lake Oswego who plays pickleball.
The question is where?
Yeah, where we have to think about it. And
We did think about it.
I mean, any park would do, honestly. No, and for me, you know my position. For me, any park will do. All of them can do pickleball, all the parks.
It's been a year getting rid of pickleball. What are you doing?
So and you know, I don't want to bring up some controversial thing, but we have, like, for example, the parks that are isolated there, they can have pickleballs.
Well, it's on the list, high priority.
Yeah, no, I know, but I say it shouldn't be on, it has to be done, not on the long, like in the very short term.
It's in the short term.
Next year, we have to have pickleball at the most. I was thinking, what?
The LORAC.
No, yeah, we know that, but LORAC is not. And also, like, the other thing was I was going to talk about funding.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list of short-term or near-term projects is to, again, build new pickleball or implement that in an outdoor park.
DEI.
So, and that we'll talk about
Thank
too.
you, Councilor Wu. Yeah, thank you, Councilor.
So I thank you for all your work. I think this is really great. It's good to see kind of how you're prioritizing and the different community inputs that you've been using. And I concur that we really need to look at what parks are getting used by the most people, prioritize those, the connections in all forms and what that means. But I think really anything we can do to get all ages connecting is incredibly important. And I do appreciate you looking at combining things when you can. So I appreciate that. The one thing I just wanted to mention, and this isn't maybe as fun to talk about, it goes along more with our maintenance and prevention, but I think we really need to make sure we're doing a lot of focus on fire safety and making sure, especially our natural areas, are being properly maintained and that we're setting funds aside for that. Because I think just if we're watching what's happening down south and we've watched what happened here in the past, I think we really need to make sure that we're careful because you never know when we get those high winds again. And we're very fortunate that we didn't have the fire jump the river. So I think we just need to make sure that our natural areas are truly being maintained. And I guess one of my concerns is, and I apologize, I should have asked this question ahead of time. So, but this is just a question that can maybe just be followed up at a different time. But I know with Chapter 10, we have certain restrictions on certain parks. And I'm hoping that we don't have any conflict when it comes to, again, fire safety within those parks and what we can do. I just don't know all the nuances. And I know there's a certain amount of things that we can do, but I just want to make sure that we're really being cognizant. And if we need to have a community discussion about that, that we do. Yeah, so that's it. I just came from the South visiting, so it's kind of top of mind. But that's, you know, again, we're talking about emergency preparedness. We're asking our citizens to be prepared. We're trying to get the city prepared. I think that includes our parks. So,
And you will see some strategies and recommendations around that in the system-wide recommendations associated with natural areas. So
I did notice that it is commented, but I just thought
Yeah,
I felt like I just needed to make sure that it was really put top of mind.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just to follow on that real quick, and then Councilor, are there any projects on the project list that would not be allowed under Chapter 10?
I believe that there's one, and we put it in the sort of long-term because we need to address it, and it's the Stevens Meadow Trailhead project, and we included it because we've heard a lot about it and the accessibility of that project. But, you know, as far as we are aware, it's not something that we can do with the current restrictions the way that they're stated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, anywhere where there was a potential conflict between those two things, we noted that in the plan and tried to keep that further out in the timeframe.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Willen, thank you for waiting.
I've told them, this group before, this is a tremendous amount of work, and it has lots of input. And there's a lot of moving parts. I think one of the things that we just have to keep in context is that this is a point in time, and it's by a group of people that are at the point of time, and that as this dais changes and different things in Lake Oswego changes, this is going to be a guiding principle and a guiding thing. We're not voting on something that we're saying, okay, now it's the Constitution. Every little piece in here needs to be done, because I don't know, I got on council and we started looking at things that were promised 25 years ago, and now we're finally getting the, certain things done. So what I do think would be helpful, because I love the lists of everything, but I think there's, and I don't know whether you could do this or not, but as a summary charts of what it would be, a breakdown for just the maintenance type items, whether it's long range or short range, you can put whether that is, but, and then the specific ADA costs and the enhancements, where we would be enhancing something, and then where we'd be adding or new. And then that way we can kind of get a block of kind of numbers of saying, okay, this is the, poor Ivan and his group are going to have to maintain this, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and folks, we have to come up with that number. That's kind of like a non-negotiable. ADA, we all want to complete the ADA list. As a city, what do we have? $400 million, I think, of ADA work to do, and we have a budget of about $60 million a year. So, I mean, it's going to be a long horizon on that. And I just want to make sure that as we're looking at enhancements, like to the mayor's point, what are the real, if we do an enhancement, what's the biggest bang out of the buck if we can put numbers? Because I know as a counselor in the future, it was really helpful to have some of those guiding principles, so you knew kind of where things originated from and then how you could make decisions. And then obviously we, as you know, this council loves any new shiny penny we can get our hands on. And Martha keeps slapping our hands, which is what her job is, and she does a very good job at that. But my point is that having the numbers just maybe a little bit mixed up in it, just a couple summary things that could provide us with kind of the nuts that we're dealing with, or buckets, or whatever you want to call it, that would be helpful. And then the last part is just that I think in the big picture of things, there is a lot of language in here of how people want the parks run, and it seems almost like policy verbiage. And I don't know whether that goes in a plan or whether that's more, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit policy, versus just planning guidance.
In the system-wide recommendations?
Right, when you get down to all the different things. I mean, I think they're great suggestions. All I'm saying is that we may agree with it now. You may have another group in here, and they're going to say, you know what, really, we value this department over, it just, does that make sense? I don't know, you're a policy person.
No, there should be some policy guidance in the plan itself, which will help prioritize not just the capital projects, but all the other activities that are outlined in the plan. So there should be some policy elements. You're right, and thank you for bringing up the ADA plan, because in addition to that, we have a transportation system plan that has hundreds of millions of dollars worth of street improvement projects, and we can only fund a small fraction of them every year. Every capital plan we have, every long-range plan, has a more ambitious capital agenda than we can afford. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. But I do think that to the extent that if there's anything in there in terms of policy guidance that you have reservations about whether we can actually operate the department, I think it'd be great if you brought that to their attention right now so that we don't end up adopting something. We follow policies that councils adopted decades ago, still today, so because that is how
Right.
we'll run the department. So if you have any concerns about any of the policy statements, please let us know as soon as you possibly can.
Okay.
Do you have any concerns about it?
Well, not, I mean, specifically, I'm not going to go through, I have 400 items that I wanted to discuss. No, I'm just kidding. No. My point is that what I've also seen is if you put too much guidance in it, then what happens is people come in, it ties people's hands, but it sets the expectation that all these things are going to be done and that they're going to come in and say, okay, well, you said that, i.e. that this park was going to be done so that my kid could play on it, and it's in your plan, and you said you would do this. And you're like, well, yes, we would like to do this, but it's not policy, this is a guiding principle so that we don't get caught. I mean, it's the public perception of where they say, okay, here's the plan, why aren't you implementing this, and every little last minute of it. And we don't have the fiscal dollars, we don't have the people power to do that. So that's I guess my only concern about it is I don't want to set us up for expectations that we can't live up to.
You're concerned that we're overcommitting through the plan to what we can actually
As
deliver.
everything, really. I mean,
Well, I think,
everything.
well, every plan we have does that. I mean, I don't mean to be, because in part you want to do that a little bit because that's what makes you eligible for grant funding and other places where you might go get funding to support this. But I think I understand the reservation, which is I think we need to just have some statements in the plan that sort of say, this is our dream. This is our
dream, right.
This is our
Aspirational.
hope. But of course, funding is a limitation. Of course, staff capacity and community capacity are limitations. There will be other limitations like Chapter 10 that come up over time that will also influence our ability to execute the plan. So I do think some kind of statement in there that says, this is our dream, our vision, but we know that we're going to work towards it. We'll never really achieve it.
And I'm fresh off of reviewing the narrative content of the plan, and I'm pretty sure we make those types of statements in a number of places in the plan. And if we haven't yet, Kira's reading those sections of the plan right now. So we'll both make sure that we do say those things. It is really important to say those things so that we're not over-promising. I think, as you all said, it's important to be aspirational. It's important to identify what people think are important, but not to say we will absolutely do every single thing in this plan, because that's also not realistic. So yeah, totally understand the point. And thank you for the suggestions about how to kind of present the information, because again, that's timely too, since we're in the process of drafting the document itself. So
I think especially for the 15-year CIP, one of the advantages to including all of the projects you can possibly think of on that list is that then we can determine whether those are SDC eligible. And it kind of helps us build the case for that type of funding. And so we want to say, okay, realistically, what are all the things that we're going to need to pay for in the next 15 years? But I do think that you're right, this is definitely a snapshot in time, and it kind of becomes a living document. I mean, there's things on there that we think we need to do in the near term that definitely were not on our previous Parks Plan 2025 list because we had never thought of them, like pickleball, for example. There's going to be things that come up that jump to the top that we couldn't have even imagined right now. I don't know what they are, but certainly they will be there.
So I think some language around that too, that this is a framework, this is a foundation. It doesn't mean it can't change or you can't identify other things that are as important or more important maybe even than some of the things in this plan. So, yeah.
Thank you.
But it's great work. I just didn't want to.
Thank you.
I didn't want to say, I just want to, I'm more of an under-promise, over-deliver versus over-promise, under-deliver person, so that's just my style.
Thank you, Councilor Woodland. It's good. Councilor Raff, thank you for you've been waiting.
Yeah, I think we got more, right? You got more for us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'll be quick. From a strategy perspective, I just, from the private side, I have a tough time looking at a strategy that's 15 years out, because it's not a strategy, right? So I think what we really have to look at this is really in the near term, what the next 5 years look like, because all of us, or most of us, 3 of us here will impact that, or actually no, most of us will. So I think that's the way I'm looking at this. The stuff that's 10, 15 years out, it's all going to be gone, and irrelevant in my opinion. I was going to bring up what John brought up, which is managing expectations. I don't want us to get 10 years down the road and the one person that wanted a sand volleyball court didn't get their sand volleyball court, right? And then we have to answer for that. So I think over communicating that these are just like the wish list, and we can do anything we want. We can't do everything we want. I think that's the message that is external. So just be very, very careful how we're messaging everything about this. Because again, I don't want the person that wants a sand volleyball court to actually think they're getting a sand volleyball court, because I don't see that ever happening. Sorry, I don't see that happening of all the other things we got to do. Like in Oregon, I've seen it. It doesn't work. Like there's pine needles all over the thing. Like it just doesn't work. So anyway, so amazing job to get all this, and it's great to have in our back pocket. But I think we really just got to look at it in the near term, in the next 5 years, on what is really stuff that we can action. So
I won't tell the person who really wanted the sand volleyball court about that.
That is an excellent segue to the next section. I'm not going to go straight there, but that is a really good segue. Yeah.
Let me just add one more. I appreciate Councilor Rouse' comments, and just going back to the, to the list, what do we call this list? Of these recommendations, all these different goals and then sub-goals underneath them. I mean, is there a way to so many of them tie into other city plans. It's a great list. I mean, but it is very extensive.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could cross-reference, and many of them are ongoing, things that are already happening, so, it's fine, they're, listed. But maybe cross-referencing them with other plans and actions of even other boards and commissions. And then I do want to, we come into the connected system. I mean, a lot of them do kind of seem to be saying the same thing. Provide recreation events that encourage attendance by active transportation and use of pedestrian and bike network. Consider programmatic and physical improvements to improve access by motorized and public transit. I mean, there's a lot of different, they're all different, but they're all kind of saying, a lot of them are just getting at, more connectivity. There's the, working around connected trails, community shuttle, but also the safe routes to parks. I don't know. They just seem like they're all very similar, but slightly different. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like maybe something broader. They're very, and then there's one very specific project here about the Hallmark Festival Street project, which, we also have a different project that's referenced in this plan, which is, some kind of community type park center in Lake Grove, which we have on the council goals. So I would recommend we take this off. If we're pursuing an alternative to the Festival Street, which is like some kind of, plaza on the west side that would serve the function that has been envisioned for that Festival Street.
The Hallmark Street?
Yeah. It just is a very specific project that might be in conflict with a different plan that we have right now. So
It's in the TSP currently, I believe.
Yeah, that's my recommendation. Seems odd to pursue two projects that are accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah, and I will say in terms of duplicative things, we've taken a pass at that at least once or twice, but we can take another look and see, are there ways we can reduce things that are duplicative of each other. We've tried, but it's never going to get all the way there on one or two tries. And then we do have some information in, I think, the supporting document that goes with this that identifies which things are ongoing. So we do have information about that. And we also have information in that earlier document that sort of cross-references this to other plans and where these things came from. So that information is available. We can provide it either in an appendix. The challenge is always in the plan itself, like not overloading it with information, but making it clear that, yes, a lot of these things are ongoing, or a lot of these things are things that are that came from or related to other planning processes you all have.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me just clarify too. We don't want to just remove having some kind of place on the west side to have community gatherings. We just want to maybe state the goal of it. Yeah, be more generic, because we have a couple options that we're pursuing, and it may be the Hallmark, but that was envisioned at a time when these other options weren't on the table, and now these other options have been kind of conceived, and and they're referenced in this plan as well, albeit in a different place, just to make it even more confusing. Given looks okay. All right. Moving on to the next section.
one. All right. So I got two more topics to talk about. One is this implementation strategy. So here what we're doing is we're highlighting some things in the plan that we think are some of the things that ought to be pursued in the next 5 years, that are some of the most important things to pursue. It's still a decent list, and some of these things do relate directly either to some of the system-wide recommendations or to some of the capital improvements. I'll try to note where those are. We did kind of front-load this list a little bit. 10 of these are in the first couple of years, another 4 in the midterm, so not the midterm 5 to 10, but 3 to 5. So I'm going to talk about each of these very briefly, just kind of hit a couple high points, see if you have any comment. Well, and then I'll talk about funding, and then we'll see if you have comments on this topic or the funding topic. So one is just making sure that we've got all these recommendations, we've identified them. The city needs to track how they're doing on achieving these things and communicating that out to folks. So that's one. 2, you've done a ton of engagement as part of this process, and you're going to continue to do engagement around parks planning and parks facilities construction moving forward. So just, recognizing that and recognizing that it's important to continue doing that in a consistent way with the community. So that's number 2 there. We heard a lot of comments during this process about just improving access to information, particularly digital information around your parks. What's there? When are activities taking place at a given park? What facilities, pathways, trails, et cetera, are accessible within a park? What's the average grade? Things of that nature. So we heard a lot of comments about that. So that's what number 3 is around, is just improving kind of that digital interface for folks. And then number 4 gets to, I think, the DEI comment that was made, that is really important. And the Parks Board has been going through a process of identifying kind of a DEI framework for the park system. And so making sure that you do have an equitable process for delivering services, that it does incorporate a DEI process, and that you're syncing up with both the citywide policies around that, as well as for the department as a whole. And then number 5, you're one of a kind of handful of organizations in this state that has what's called CAPRA certification. That's a really big deal for a city to have that certification. You got that fairly recently. So maintaining that, staying in compliance with those guidelines is really important for the community. Number 6, you were, the Parks Department recently was, gifted. Is that something that?
Well,
hasn't happened yet. Oh, okay. Maybe you better talk about this one. Number
We are
6.
in the process of beginning to, in the future, maintain and manage the Oswego Pioneer Cemetery. So we need to come up with a plan for how to do that.
I always forget the status of some of these things. Sorry about that. So yeah.
Never mind.
Wow. I don't know. So the next one is something y'all talked about earlier, is just you have a natural resource management plan. So you've got a plan for how to manage your natural resources and open spaces, but just continue to implement that plan, continuing to enhance that plan, making sure it's consistent with best practices, dealing with things like wildfire prevention and risk. So that's kind of what number 7's about there. And then, again, we've identified a set of prioritized projects in this plan, but more things are going to come along, and there ought to be sort of a process and a consistent set of criteria for prioritizing future projects. So you may start with the sort of set of criteria we used here and build on that, or you might come up with some tweaks to that. But we think having something you use consistently moving forward is important. Implementing the Luscher Area Master Plan, again, that's an important goal for the city generally, particularly given kind of the ability now to do some things consistent with what the county allows. So that's great, and you'll see those projects kind of throughout the project list. And then we've got this project in the near-term list of capital projects to construct 4 to 8 or provide 4 to 8 outdoor pickleball courts. But there's also an implementation strategy in here around creating a business plan for future indoor pickleball courts as well, in addition to what you'll have in the LORAC. and doing a site opportunity analysis on that. So we think that's another thing you should be looking at. And it's something that people talk to us about is, hey, you know, maybe having some indoor space for that kind of facility would be really good too. I just talked to somebody last weekend who had just been playing pickleball at the Lloyd Center at the new facility they have there, which is sort of fascinating. They've got now a indoor pickleball facility in Lloyd Center, and
They have lots of space there.
Lots of space, exactly, and no one is complaining about the noise in that one, so, anyway.
Can you explain, implement the Luscher area master plan? I mean, to me, I read that as saying the plan is there and you're implementing it.
That's kind of what it means. It was adopted in 2013, and there's all these really wonderful recommendations and work that was put into it that we haven't really been able to move forward with due to some zoning complications.
Right.
And
That's what, yeah, I mean, well, first we have to get the zone, and then.
Yeah, the first step is to apply to the county. So we worked with them last year to create basically a procedural pathway for us to submit a land use application and them to review it while it's still in exclusive farm use. So Matt earlier noted that there's some things that we will never be able to do until way down the line when, you know, that area is kind of annexed into the city, but there is a pathway now for us to apply to the county to implement some of the recommendations in that plan while it's still in unincorporated Clackamas County. So that's what this recommendation is really talking about.
Kind of a recognition that there are still some things that staff needs to do in order to implement what's in the plan that are sort of in addition to or create the pathway to actually do the things. So it's like doing the things to be able to do the things. It's kind of a little muddy, but.
I guess when I think Luscher plan, it's like all the additional stuff that we have on that list. And is that funded?
No, it's not. Well, we did agree to dedicate a portion of the Metro Local share dollars towards improving the driveway and parking lot, but aside from that, it is not funded.
Right, so that's what I'm talking about, language that puts us in a really awkward position, because if we say implement the Luscher area master plan in 0 to 2 years, it's taken us 6 years to get LORAC built, okay? And I mean, I'm all for Luscher, I mean, develop, but we don't have the money to do the 15 projects that they have on the list, that I've seen on the list, and that's probably $6 or $7 million.
Well, and this other land use thing, shouldn't we put that on as kind of step one?
So
that's step one of this. These are sort of intended to be like, so what are the steps that would be needed to do this thing? And I think we need some additional explanation, but I think this is trying to say we should start that within the next 2 years, start that process. Certainly it won't be complete.
So
kind of lay out the process.
lay out the process for that. I mean, that would be.
That's a good point.
When you say implement, that means like, we're ready to go, shovel ready, and we're going to have all the, because I love the Luscher people. They are the most dedicated, wonderful people, but they have a long list of things that need to be done, and we don't have the money to pay for everything on that. And I don't want to mislead them and say, hey, we're all for this, and we want to, here we go. I just want to, again, set the expectations correctly. I guess that's the.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think this is like shorthand for the longer version that's in a memo, but I think being really clear here is really important.
Right, you guys are in this business.
Yeah.
The public only sees what they have a very small portion of it, when I say implement, boom.
Yeah, implement.
We're ready to go.
Get it done.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, good point, well taken. All right, I've got one more slide on implementation strategies, and we'll talk about funding. So these are again, midterm, but 3 to 5 years here. So there's 4 here. The first is around universal design practices. So what are the things that you can and should be doing around universal design, which means basically making things accessible to people of all abilities. So what can you be doing in terms of kind of any park or playground improvement? And then also there is a project or in the plan that talks about building, either building or replacing a facility that's completely all-inclusive. So that's sort of the second aspect of this. So this is sort of doing some more thinking about how do you do that? How, where, when? And then engaging, we've talked about this previously, I think, or certainly at the Parks Board meetings, but engaging with the school district around shared use of facilities. You know, you previously had a formal joint use agreement with them. That's not in place anymore. Again, it's really important to continue to coordinate and communicate with them about community use of school district facilities, vice versa. So, you know, there's a lot more words in the document around this one, but I think this one's pretty important. And then again, we've got a number of projects in here that where the city needs to identify the site at which the thing's going to happen. And so that's why they're not in the short-term list, but in the short term, should be moving ahead and making some progress on some of those projects to do that analysis of where these things might be able to most appropriately take place. So there's this strategy there about just moving forward on those, even if they're not going to actually get implemented until the medium or the longer term. And then finally, there's a strategy here around consistent signing and wayfinding. The city has a signage and wayfinding plan, so the first step is to implement that. But there's more, I think, that can be done around that. We had a fair bit of discussion around this issue with our CAC and Parks Board. So there's a strategy there, too, that's in that, again, 5-year period.
Did you all talk about those emotionally intelligent signs? We were talking about that. That come up? Oh, I should put those emotionally intelligent park signs.
I don't know if we did.
You have in your, consulting work you could do?
I'm not personally, but I am also not an expert on wayfinding and signage.
It's about thinking about how can you give people a positive message as opposed to a no fun message.
Got it.
So as
Okay.
opposed to saying no dog poop, it's more about here's why you should clean up your dog poop.
Yeah.
Here's why you should have your dog in the leash.
Well, you don't ride your e-bike 60 miles
Don't
an hour.
run
through
over your
foothills,
grandma, kind of.
Don't jump off the dolphin.
It's more about trying to connect people back to the reasons why you have a rule as opposed to just stating the rule.
Could be a
There
really
are
cool
some of the
Yeah.
older signs, if you go to some of the older signs in some of the older parks, it's just a long list of no fun.
Yeah.
Like no smoking,
It's
no
not
playing, no jumping,
Right.
no
All the things you
running
can't do.
around, all the things you want to do at a park, you can't do.
Yeah. It'd be a good, it sounds like it was something that I thought the department was looking at. Maybe. I thought it was a great idea. I just have to say, yeah.
I saw a great sign yesterday or the day before at a park, not here, but it said, "The poop fairy does not exist."
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe
it's like,
along
I
those
mean,
lines.
some of just the common complaints. One, some of it's dangerous. Like you have the kids that jump off the dolphin, even though the sign is right there that says don't jump off the dolphin. And they don't even realize that, it's because there's rocks underneath. I mean, they just think it's, they
might
just don't want
die.
us having fun. Yeah, you might die. And then it's the people who walk their dogs off leash in the parks because their dog is well behaved. And, there's got to be a better way to mess it. I mean, I was assaulted by a woman in a park when I confronted her about that. So there's just, seems like there's better ways. Like people know the rule, but they just think it doesn't apply to them, know? And then, this, I like this number 12, and it made me think of something, the school district, and tying it back to, so over the summertime, the pickleball players, and again, they're, adults and they can go to the school district too, but again, because it's such a big topic in the community that I know you're hearing a lot in Parks Plan, it would be great if maybe we could facilitate some of this summertime school district tennis courts, pickleball folks, because I mean, it's obviously not indoors, but I mean, that worked great last summer. And, I don't think, we don't have to take a backseat to that, I don't know.
Even, you are so right. When we were using the school district, that it was, I'm talking as a player, a football player, like the last leagues, we shortened the time to play. People were not happy because we can only use 2 fields. Like the city, we cannot use Elo High anymore. We cannot use Lake Ridge. And I mean, we need to talk with them in order that, we use those fields. Like, honestly, we've been using them, and I think Ivan is here, can say, but and I'm pretty sure next season, same thing. Football, you play 30 minutes is not. I mean,
Ivan, you could correct me, but we actually have a particular problem right now because the LO Junior High is under construction, right? So it may be more of a temporary rather than a permanent.
like the 2, but even before the LO, the Lake Ridge field was it's been 2 years we haven't played in Lake Ridge. But we've been playing, even 2 seasons ago, we played in Lake Oswego, but now no more Lake Oswego. No, there's only 2 fields. We play, and like 30, all the players now play 30 minutes everywhere, and I am the one that everybody will point because they say I'm the council. Why, and I say, I don't know, but
This is one of the reasons that we're updating our athletic field requirement study right now, is to try to capture some of the changes to how reservations have been handled recently, and hopefully we can get some recommendations from that study that address what's going on and how we can coordinate with them to make it better.
I guess, and just to, sorry, go back, that I appreciate Councilman Boop's point about the multi-use fields. But it may be in the short term, along with that, looking for the indoor site for pickleball, we could add something about working with the school district on those outdoor courts.
Yeah.
Well, everything on number 12 is really important.
Yeah,
And we just need to go back, and I think maybe there's an evaluation that has to happen because we've been out of the agreement for a couple of years now, and we should probably say, here's groups that are frustrated, and we probably need to get together between the city and the school district and say, okay, this is the reality. Are we serving our public in the best possible ways?
We're going to have a joint meeting this spring, maybe. We talk about that.
And maybe that it's the time to say, at least both entities have a report saying, because of the decisions we made for not having joint use and so on, these are the consequences that happened, and these are things that we need to work on.
Yeah.
And I know they're going to say, because LOJ is out or whatever, but I'm sorry, we have, that cannot affect the way I'm hearing the same thing about gym space, and we've heard about gym spaces for, gosh, as long as our kids have been born, and that was 25 years ago, right? 30 years ago? I mean, it's been a long time. So it's a continuing problem regardless of whether they're having construction schedules or not, so.
Okay.
All right. Okay, we'll talk about funding and then just see if you have any more comments, questions about any of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about a mix of things. So these are the strategies you're already using. There are some other ones too that I'll note that you're already using, but these are kind of the primary funding strategies that you're using, both to fund capital improvement projects as well as to fund operation and maintenance. Wherever you see a round circle, that refers to capital funding, and the diamond is operations and maintenance. So you're well familiar with all of these. General fund, the 2019 obligation GO bond that funded a lot of large-scale facilities, including the LORAC, your demolition tax, your system development charges, and then user fees. And then the next set of slides will include some of these. It'll include all of these, but also some other things that you could be looking at. And the way I'll kind of preface this next set of slides is that it's not a recommendation that you implement each and every one of these things. It's that you think of them as sort of a toolbox or a menu of things you could pursue in the future to be able to achieve the goals in this plan. So I just kind of want to be clear that that's sort of the intent here. And I'll also say that as I go through these, because there's like 5 more slides and 15 funding mechanisms, I won't talk about every one of them because I think you're pretty familiar with some of them, but I will kind of highlight a few here and there that might be newer things or things you haven't done before. So that's my little set of caveats before we jump in. This is just the list of things I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, so we won't say anything more about that. So grants, metro local share, and partnerships, these are all things you're familiar with, you're used to. They weren't in sort of that first list, but they are things you've used in the past, and we expect you to continue to use those things in the future. And so we've highlighted these in the funding strategies document and part of the plan. So that's kind of as much as I'll say about those. Facility business plan, I don't know how much you've used that one in the past. Clearly, fees you've used. The facility business plan is not so much a funding mechanism. It's more a way to think about how you use different types of funding sources. So it's a good sort of planning tool around this. And then Parks and Rec Foundation, that's something that Lake Oswego hasn't really done. Other communities have used that fairly successfully. That was something the Parks Board said, hey, this is something we should be thinking about here. There's probably a lot of opportunity to create and use a foundation, particularly for certain types of projects, or to leverage money for certain types of projects and kind of add to what you're using or what you're getting from some of these other funding sources. So I'll just kind of note that, they are separate organizations, and they can kind of go beyond the scope of some of the things that the Parks and Rec Department might do. A couple of these you're pretty familiar with. Again, the general obligation bond, and the point here is just that was a very successful mechanism to fund some large-scale improvements here, and it could be something you pursue in the future during the life of this plan. So we're identifying it as a potential thing. We are in the process, again, as part in this same general timeframe of updating your SDC methodology. And so we'll be back to you to talk about that in more detail. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. But we'll have some fairly specific things where we need some policy direction from you on that, or where we give you some possible recommendations and you tell us, yeah, those make sense, or no, you need to make some tweaks here. The parks maintenance utility fee is not something you've implemented. There are a number of jurisdictions around the state and region that have used this fairly successfully. It's basically a fee per household or business. It's similar to, in some ways, like a sewer or water fee, and it is used then to fund operations and maintenance. And to the extent you're seeing a shortfall in other revenues from other mechanisms, this may be something you want to pursue in the future, at least in terms of exploring it. There's some initial kind of quick analysis of what this could generate in the future if you set it at a certain rate for households and or businesses. So you'll see that in that funding memo, but I'll just kind of note that. Next ones, these aren't necessarily things that generate a huge amount of money, but in some ways, every little bit helps. And in particularly like soliciting donations is something we had members of the CAC and Parks Board say, hey, if somebody wants to provide a piece of land or a facility, and if it makes sense, if it's going to make sense for you to own and maintain and use, that's worth thinking about. So, you probably already do this, but think about maybe there's a way to sort of get the word out that you're happy to do this if it makes sense for you on that one. Similar sort of thing with land swaps or long-term leases. Sponsorship programs, you're already doing this to a degree, so it's just continuing to do that, thinking about are there ways you can expand that type of program and strengthen those relationships within the community. And then a few more. So, we put down here, expand general fund money. I mean, you make decisions about how to fund parks and recreation in tandem with decisions about how to fund other things the city does. So that's always kind of out there as, a policy you can think about. Local option levy, that's a thing that requires voter approval. And so you'd want to think carefully about that one before you move forward with something like that. And then tax increment financing, that's something that's going to take some more time and study in terms of how that is used in concert with Parks and Recreation. But we wanted to put that on the list again as a potential thing to pursue, and make sure it's aligning with other TIF or tax increment financing goals of whatever that district might be. So I won't say much more about alter demolition tax. That's already in place. You are seeing, I think, some declining potential future revenues from that, although when we projected revenues, we kind of kept it steady, which is, I think, one of my last slides coming up. Yep, which is this one. So I will just say a few things about this table because I think Kira told me it was still confusing to her after looking at it like 3 or 4 times. So I'll try to maybe make it less confusing. We'll see.
If she doesn't get it, we'll never get it.
I don't know, so I'll do my best. So the couple things I'll say, one is you don't see STC revenues in here because we're going through that process of updating the methodology, and we didn't want to put in a projection and then have it be totally off, based on what we come up with here. So that's one thing to note. Two, for most of these sources, what you're seeing is the average, the 10-year average annual revenue just projected straight out, and it's in all of this is in 2024 dollars. We didn't kind of do an escalation by inflation here. The one exception is general revenue. We did escalate that because you do see an increase in general fund revenue based on increases in property tax valuations. So we just bumped it up 3% per year. Because that's generally what you're seeing. So we did escalate that, but we didn't escalate any of these other numbers. And so this is sort of all the money that would come from these sources, and that would be used to pay for, over that period of time, maintenance as well as capital improvement costs. So you might look at that number at the bottom right and say, wow, it's plenty of money, we're good. You told us you only need 88 million for capital projects, but you also need that money to maintain things and operate your system over the years. So I think the bottom line is you likely will need to look at some other funding sources besides what's in this table, but this gives you a sense of what you could, again, at a basic level, project over this planning period from the sources that you have now. Again, minus STCs because we didn't include them in this table.
So the general revenue number of the 7.7, that's our budget line item of what we run Parks and Recreation off of, right? No? Or is that extrapolated just?
That's your general fund allocation, yeah, based on what you've done over the last.
Oh, no.
No, it doesn't include fee revenue. Yeah, I don't think we included fee revenue on here because that's another one that's like really hard to project because, for instance, LORAC's about to come online. That's going to significantly change your fee revenue. And so we did not include fee revenue here for that reason. It was just too hard to project that one. But yeah, the general fund is essentially what you've been allocating.
For programming, for everything.
Yeah, for the department.
Right, so that's not just maintenance. That is running.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the Parks Department budget.
The Parks Operations budget, okay.
Yep, exactly.
265 million.
So that's over that 15-year period. So we're escalating it by 3% per year.
Yeah, but.
So that's how we get from 7.7 million per year to over a 15-year period, 165. Just adding it all up over that period, and each year it's going up by 3%.
This isn't the chart that's going to be in the final report. This
No.
is kind of.
No. This is for you.
Okay. Yeah, this doesn't really do anything.
And the other thing is, this is in a memo that we provided to you, and there's a lot of explanation about it. So I'm trying to give you the short version of the couple pages worth of text, or actually 10 pages worth of text that goes with this. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to try to give you a little explanation because just looking at the chart, it's a little too much. So that's it. That was actually other than next steps, that was my last sort of information slide. And just want to see if you have additional thoughts, questions, comments around, we talked a little bit about implementation strategies, but around funding or implementation strategies.
Councilor Raff.
Yeah, really great. The only thing I would say as we talk about fees, one thing that I've been meaning to bring up, Martha and I have talked about it, Ivan's in the back. We should reassess or reconsider the fees we charge at LORAC. I think there's some room for us, as we were talking about earlier, there's some room for us to maybe, I think you can increase fees a little bit to help kind of shore up some cash and to pay for some of these other Parks and Rec things that we like. So I'd like us to, before the LORAC opens, maybe relook at that, so. Okay, otherwise, great. Thank you. Love it.
Councilor Wu?
Yeah, No, I mean, thank you, but there is something I was asking on funding. And it's something I've talked to Martha and others, what is your view? In my view, I say, for example, building a field at Luscher, we can ask Nike, we can ask all those big sport things. I don't know what's your company, but I say Under Armour. Huh?
Talking about the new one.
Yeah, Under Armour, Nike, Adidas. Tell them if one of them can build the field, like the soccer field there, and maybe in return we say a recognition of their work. I mean, I don't know how legally if the legal aspect of that, but I think we should also think of those partners, you know.
That's the idea behind that sponsorships funding strategy is exactly that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, is the general plan that, you know, that this plan lays out these different options that down the road, then we would hone particular strategies as part of a separate work plan?
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, that it's not Matt's job to tell you, but it is my job to tell you, is you have to weigh these priorities against all of your other priorities. So when he says allocate more general fund revenue, my mind immediately goes to, well, are we going to reduce the library or the police department or the fire department? I mean, I think those are your policy conversations about where does funding for these activities fit in with all of the suite of services the city provides.
Yep.
Exactly. So it's a future kind of conversation around, you know, whether it's a bond or these fees, you know, and all of that. Councilor Afke.
That was going through my mind also, because we're hypothetically talking about these projects and how much money it's going to take and where the money comes from. I also want to make sure that the decisions we make from the funding source doesn't impact our other directions. For example, if we increase the demolition tax, is that going to impact the housing production strategy? Because now we cannot it gets so expensive that the developers won't want to go there. So I want to make sure that we have those ties before we make decisions which direction we go. And I had supported the SDCs going to system development charges going to the parks. I'm not sure if I agree with that any longer, because we charge people for tying to the system, which is sewer, water, storm, and then we grab the money, we put it in the parks, yet we go back to the homeowners for the future and say, we want more money to build you a sewer station. So that one, I want to have a conversation where this money, why we charge the money and where it goes.
What are you talking about?
We'll do a study session on SDCs if you'd like. But just so you know, if you pay an SDC for sewer, it stays in the sewer fund.
Yeah.
If you pay an SDC for water, it stays with water. We never take money from.
Park stays in parks.
So
Parks
where-
has an SDC of their own,
Yeah. Stays in
and that stays in parks.
In that case, I'm 100% okay.
Look at that
Yes,
problem
we do
solved.
that. But City Manager Bennett promised a study session, right?
I'm happy to
Well,
do a study session, in part because I think it doesn't have to be a long one. It could be like 5 minutes. We could do a 5-minute.
You could do it
SDC.
during the budget
Yeah, we'll do
season.
it during the budget process because SDCs are a critical part of funding your capital improvement plan for water, sewer, transportation, and parks. We'll do it that way. I will say SDCs are constantly something that gets talked about at the legislature, so I think we want to be thoughtful about how we talk about it. And again, if you pay a water SDC, it stays in the water system.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone, for the great discussion. Thank Matt, Kira, thank you, and the CAC members and the Parks Board. I mean, you all have really put a ton of work into this, obviously, and it's really shaping up to be a great plan. I mean, it's so different than 2025 plan in so many ways. It's kind of interesting to see the differences. And we'll not see them, think about them. But thank you for hearing our feedback, and just really appreciate your work guiding the creation of this important plan. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This next, okay, oh, yeah, here. Okay, we're gonna take a little recess. We'll come back. Oh, no. Recess. Yeah, we just get on the playground. Okay, we're back in order. Next item on the agenda is item 9.3. This is a discussion of the 2025 legislative agenda. We have Ms. Thiesing with us. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for having me, excuse me, this evening. I'm Madison Thiesing, Assistant to the City Manager. I am here today to present the 2025 legislative agenda, which is also very appropriate because today is the first day of session. Yeah. So here we go again. So far, over 2,000 bills have been introduced. It is a long session, which means we'll be running through June. One thing about long session, it's also the year that they adopt the budget. So we will end with not only adopted bills, but also a budget that will guide the state for the next 2 years. The governor has put out her priorities, which are homelessness and housing supply, mental health and addiction services, and education. What was not on that list was the transportation package, which we know is going to be a huge lift for this session. They haven't really hinted at what's going to be in that package yet. It's been through a lot of discussion through the off session, but we know that is going to come and that will create. This is the whole package. How are we going to fund the whole system? So that's just a landscape. Today starts the day, basically. As a reminder, for every long session, we recommit our legislative principles, and those don't change based off a session. Those are the ones that we stand true as our foundation for our advocacy efforts. That's to preserve home rule authority, avoid unfunded mandates, and leverage regional and state partnerships. So we always keep that lens whenever we're advocating at the state. And then secondary, every long session we adopt an agenda, which are our priorities that are the landscape of today. So that reflects what we know might be a priority, but also what are we responding to that we need as a priority during session to advocate for. Those for this year, I took a different approach. I've really focused. One thing that I think I've matured in my role in a lot of ways is trying to be laser focused on proactive on what we're bringing forth. Similar to how the governor's approaching it, is being really focused on what our priorities are. And so our priorities for this session will be to have a comprehensive transportation funding package, and restore recreational immunity, pause the housing policies, and direct funding for essential infrastructure projects. So I'm going to go through each one of those just for a little bit more detail, and then we can quickly go over how does this operate then month by month. So the first one that really is what we know is going to be a focus for the legislature, but also what is the long-term funding mechanisms for cities for our state revenues, is the comprehensive transportation package. So what we know from the Oregon Department of Transportation is they've been operating in a deficit of hundreds of millions. And so the package they're going to need to pass is not just for the large projects that were promised in 2017, but also to fill the funding gaps that are needed for ongoing maintenance and projects. And so we're looking at a package of billions of dollars. And so what we know is we as a city would still like to preserve the local share, to still be looking at options for not only just the local share, but also for our transit needs to finish the system that once people are into town. So as we know, ODOT is managing highways, but what happens when people get off of highways? And so that continues to be our focus. It's also, as outlined under the priority, is the road user fee. The the gas tax is no longer a sustainable source for the type of technologies we have, but then also knowing that we need options for transit and different multimodal, so more than just relying on gas tax. So that has been talked about quite a bit. Tolling was a part of that conversation previously. It was always talked about that it was going to come back in 2025 as a big conversation. I'm sorry, I'm going through this pretty fast. During off session, so this summer, and into fall, while I was on leave, Mayor Buck, as well as our transportation engineer, who's Will Farley, was able to attend the road show that the joint committee had gone through, and they had hearings. They went from every region of the state to hear what are the needs, but also what possibilities are we going to fund this. So one thing that I give a lot of credit to our staff through fall was to doing proactive engagement, talking to legislators, but also coming in really focused as a region. So Clackamas County coming in with a focus of how are we going to advocate for what our needs are in our corner of the Portland metro area as well. Any questions on transportation before I move on? No, okay.
Well, could I, do you want to talk about the STIF? reform?
If you would like to.
Stiff. Well, I don't know what the group is. It's the transit folks.
It's like TriMet and
TriMet, yeah, it's not, but like their group, like their advocacy group.
I don't know what they're
It's like
actually called.
Yeah, but anyway, I think it's, we were talking about this at C4 last meeting. They're proposing a fivefold, three? I think it might be more than that. It's like something, increase to the STIF, which is the employee paid payroll tax, that was, implemented in more recent history, to yet further expand. And so C4 group, we're going to convene a transportation group. And I do think there's some advocacy around this and just how the STIF is spent. And in communities like Lake Oswego, we see this. We just saw this, come up in the parks plan. And it just around shuttle service, some way to get people around town. But right now, what I've been told from TriMet is, well, you can't use STIF because that's not transit. That doesn't count because you're not leaving the city. And we have communities in Clackamas County especially who, we're a little less dense, and a fixed route system doesn't work, but an on-demand system, like we hear community members asking for it consistently, especially with older population, would work really well. And so I've been advocating that they just change the definition of transit so it would include these uses, so that if they do increase the STIF, that they would work with not just other transit, because we don't need a transit system in Lake Oswego, but we need, and that's all the money goes to. So if you don't have a transit system, you're not getting, you're not getting the money. So people are looking for more flexible uses, because I think we're kind of tired of folks in the community paying these taxes for which they receive no benefit, and then business paying the taxes for which they're receiving no benefit. And these would be good benefits for the community to move people around. So that's the only thing, is that STIF. And I don't know how that's going to fit into, that's another big, that's a little hefty tax increase there. I don't know what kind of appetite they're going to have to do on, and that's just the STIF. That's not this other broader transportation funding that's just related to this transit outside of the TriMet tax. So so some of that money, even though it's supposed to be outside the TriMet district, so it's statewide. Because, the TriMet district is just a small district, well, within the metro area. Yeah, it's kind of, but some of the STIF money does get spent inside the TriMet district, and of course, a lot of it's collected inside the TriMet district. So, yeah, anyway, STIF, big topic.
Do we know the amount, because all the employees,
everyone pays it.
But do we know how much, for example, per city, do we know?
Oh, the amount, well, no, but that is one of the arguments, where it's collected and then where it's distributed. Big mismatch, big mismatch. That's one of the problems. So we'll have more information, I think, when we convene this transportation group through the C4.
Okay. Great. So next one is restoring recreational immunity. I believe everyone is aware of this topic. It was put as a temporary fix last session. It will be coming back as a permanent fix, hopefully. And we had the opportunity to meet with Senator Wagner as well as Representative Nguyen and talk about this. So it's just, we will continue to work on that. While I was on leave, Kira Haggard actually worked on some maps to show what the trail system would be if we have to shut down, and then also the cost of how much we've been putting forward on those trails that would eventually no longer be in use if this was to continue as is. So it's one that is a priority by the league, but also will continue to be a priority for us, and it seems like this is the window to do it the most. Number 3 is to pause on the housing policies. As everyone is aware at this meeting, we've been working on this since the last long session, so since 2023. 2019, so we've been at this for a while. So to truly pause, we recognize that the governor's housing priorities, housing and homelessness are still a priority, but the ask is that we pause, not add any more, and allow the work to continue that has already been adopted and allow for the implementation process to happen. So that's not only the middle housing, but it's CFEC, so the climate friendly equities. Gosh, this is clearly, I'm really rusty. Equitable communities, as well as now the new body of work that came from the last governor's bill, which was the variances that are allowed. And so we are working through that exemption process that the planning staff is working on. So our ask really is just to pause, don't add more, just let us finish implementation to see the realized impact of all these land use, housing, policies that are in place, and how much are we actually producing of housing? Because that's the other thing. All these levers keep getting changed, but we haven't actually seen if it's creating more housing yet. Well, yes. And it is a number, she only has 3 priorities that she has said, so it's number 1. Yes. Excuse
So
me.
this is really pause on additional housing. So I think if we can make that modification, because
Okay.
when I was reading that, it started confusing me. But then I got to the last bullet, I go, aha, that's what it means.
Yes, pause.
Not all of it now.
Thank you for that. Okay. Next one, and this is our last one, is to direct funding to essential infrastructure projects. So one thing that the legislature last session, as well as the prime before that, and actually in a lot of ways every session, has said, what's the scale of projects? What do you need to deliver on housing specifically? And that especially came from the governor's office, was what infrastructure and dollars do you need to expand housing, increase housing? What are your barriers for achieving these goals of housing need? The league has been working with cities to collect data on what is the infrastructure needed, not only for transportation, water, and wastewater, to increase housing density as well as just scale. One thing with that, and I put this on the list, is we keep telling the story, but we've had no promise of, does that mean funding's gonna come? And so that the intention is that we are gonna finish that work, as in the need has been shown, the scale has been showed, and then to have opportunities for direct funding, which is something that happened last session related to infrastructure with the Habitat project that we were able to get. So that one's kind of a loose one, but that's the intention, is if housing is a goal, we need money to be able to do that work. Any questions on that? Okay. One thing that is not on the list, but I would like to mention, we are also seeking out a legislative fix for the direct funding that we received for Habitat for Humanity. That project will not use that money in its entirety because more so about timeline. When the bill was signed, that was then the start date of when costs could be accrued. The project had already been underway, which was fine, but we aren't going to be able to use that at full amount. We're seeking a technical fix so that we could use that project potentially for another site related to affordable housing. So our goal is to keep that $1.7 million in Lake Oswego and not have to return it necessarily back to the state. We'd like to be able to use it for another project nearby. So with that, like I said, trying a different approach, super focused on those 4 areas. As a reminder, I come back every month at the second meeting of the month to recap on what bills we're seeing. As bills come up, if we need to make, if we have the mayor speak or staff or any other counselors, I just send an email as an FYI, as long as it falls in these buckets. If something does need to have a larger policy discussion, I will bring it back to council. We can talk about it to make sure that I'm in alignment of what you would like your stance to be on for that. With this approach of having 4 hyper-focused areas, my goal is to also have a 1-pager per topic of what the impact would be on any of these. So, for example, the trail system, how much have we paid for? How much would be closed? What would be the actual impact of that? Housing, also telling that story of what we've been doing, what are our successes, and why do we need the pause? So I'm hoping next time I come back, I'll have 1-pagers for each one of those, which also, if you're out having conversations, that's then a resource for you as well. The last thing I did want to flag was included in your packet was the C4 priorities, transportation priorities. These were created during summertime. We brought it before your recess as everyone's good with this regional approach. Now with number of cities having new mayors and electeds and councilors, we just wanted to bring it back to make sure this is still the approach you want to take. We didn't have a change in makeup, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss the opportunity for anyone to say anything. Okay.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Comments on?
No, I'm very.
What are you going to say about
I'm
your
very
coup?
interested in the recreation immunity, because it's something that worrying me a lot. The recreation immunity. How fast do you think we will have something?
Oh, a bill for it?
Yeah,
I have well, I don't know actually if a bill has introduced yet. I haven't gone through all of the ones related to us yet, but I can find out. That was a top priority for the league, and I think they had figured out a sponsor, but I can definitely, next time I come back, I can say what the timeline is for that.
But like for now,
Oh, excuse
we
me.
are liable, like if any.
Oh,
we
yes,
could-
yes, we have
Oh,
we have
okay.
a temporary fix.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, that's what I
And so
wanted.
right now,
Yeah.
it's fine,
Okay, good.
but we want a long-term solution.
Oh, I know, yeah. And also for grants pass versus that, yeah, how is it for us? Like, I wanted to know more, like how the city, so.
This is another one where we ought to ask the city attorney, but essentially it doesn't change anything for us. We haven't had any of the laws in place that Grants Pass had imposed, so we really don't need to change anything. The other thing I will say is that Oregon has a law that actually essentially creates the standards for Martin v. Boise for all cities in Oregon. So even though the Supreme Court found that Grants Pass's law was not unconstitutional, even in Grants Pass, they're having to identify locations. If they're going to ban camping in their parks, then they need to identify other locations. And so they're actually in the middle of that process right now. So it really doesn't change anything.
No, that's, the city manager is exactly correct, Councilor Mahboob. Essentially what the Supreme Court case said is governments may constitutionally impose restrictions on where people may sleep outdoors. Lake Oswego has never had a law that bans camping or bans or restricts sleeping outdoors in the way that was at issue at Grants Pass, that case. But as the city manager points out, in between when Grants Pass passed its ordinance and the Supreme Court of the United States heard that case, Oregon attempted a legislative fix and said, regardless of whatever the Supreme Court decides, we're going to have a state law that says you may not pass certain restrictions on people sleeping outdoors. So Oregon has restrictions on cities' ability to enact time, place, and manner regulations about when people sleep outdoors. The good news for Lake Oswego is that, again, we never had those kind of time, place, and manner restrictions, so there were never any laws that we had on the books that was impacted by any of Oregon's law or by what happened at the Supreme Court.
Great.
Thank you for the update. It was.
I will make.
That it?
If,
That was
yeah,
the end of the-
so I would say if everyone's good with that approach, we didn't have this as a council item for vote, but good with the approach, I will make sure that says additional housing. When I come back, I'll have this as a final version with one-pagers that support then each one of those buckets as well.
And then would you just make sure that things that we care about get passed?
I can
Thank
try.
you. No pressure.
Does the, can I just
As soon as
add,
you can, yeah.
does the league priority, I mean, it talks about behavioral health, does that also, I mean, are they talking about strictly behavioral health or also the mental health care system? Do you know?
You know, yeah.
Not mental health, oh.
They adopted a mental health priority a few years ago and didn't really, because for the most part, those systems are run by the counties or the states. They didn't really find that the cities themselves had a lot of.
Oh, for the cities, sure. Well, that
Right,
makes
am I
sense.
making sense? So,
Just impacts, like.
yeah, absolutely, it impacts so much, the whole suite of mental health
Oh,
services.
my God, yeah. I mean, so it's good to see the governor, you know, listing it as a priority. I mean, as they've, like, these same folks have just destroyed the systems over these years, so I don't know. I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but great, you know, I mean, but at the same time, they're the ones that, through her leadership, they dismantled the current systems. And then when the providers asked them to do more community mental health, all they did was remodel the state hospital in Salem, which was not the outcome that the providers wanted. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. So hopefully we'll see more. I just think it is what's bleeding into a lot of why it costs so, like supportive housing services cost so much, why we see the issues in housing that we're seeing right now is that it is just a cycle between the prison, the streets, the extremely limited, mental health beds that we have in the state, and then back out into the streets, the prisons. I mean, it's just, so that's who you need to be if you want to get mental health care in Oregon, is homeless and then in prison. So, great, good system, it's nonsense. Anyway, okay, thank you. Just ranting. Thank you, Ms. Stacy.
Thank you.
But on that note.
Yes, very positive. Thank you. Yes. Information from council. I would like to thank Council President Corrigan for representing the council at the MLK event on Sunday. I heard it went very well. It was a great turnout.
It was such a great event.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
so enjoyable. We had some wonderful talent. Yeah. Is it on?
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah, we had, they had absolutely wonderful talent, and it was meaningful, and it was beautiful, and it was fun, if you can combine those three things. So, and this room was packed, and we had people make comments that we needed to put 30 or 40 more chairs in this room, and we couldn't. We had people other places, and that's, I guess, the mark of a successful event. And I suspect that it will be at least that successful again next year, maybe more so.
Great.
Yep.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add on that it was, we had people I have two ladies from outside of Lake Oswego who told me they were so proud of our city that we continue to do events like that and that it was very successful. It was really, I was happy. And one of the guy who was a civil rights guy said that Lake Oswego is still holding the torch when many are dropping it in terms of what we are doing. It really made me happy that, and you did a great speech. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Raff.
Just like to report that we had our committee meeting today, and as expected and as usual, we passed with flying colors. No doubt, we have a crack squad in Sean and his team looking over the books, so
Great. Okay. John, thank you for that. Oh, fire station, yes. And then,
Yeah, we have a fire station update. The task force has identified two options that they think make the most sense that I think they're planning to bring to us. But the costs are more than I had expected. They're bracketing them between $16.7 million and $18.4 million. But those are top-down estimates, and once they bring something to us, if we make a decision, then we would be actually working with different numbers, probably lower numbers that an architect would build from the bottom up. So we need to stay tuned on that, and that's how that's progressing.
how many more meetings do you have left?
2.
Oh, okay. Okay. That'd be coming to us soon.
It's coming to you first meeting in April?
It's March.
Last,
I
second
think.
meeting in March.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Miller. That's good.
One thing is I don't know, I don't like when the city comes up with numbers and then tells all the contractors that this is how much it's going to cost to build this. I would rather have a concept of this is what we want and even tell them that our budget is 10 million and figure out how to make it happen. I know that's counter thinking in the world of public service, but I don't know, we get these numbers and then all of a sudden you get 4 bids that are within $100,000 of each. And I don't know. It's been a frustration all my life in the public world where, I don't know, I think it's the people who are making up the bids are part of the mafia that bids on the bids. But
happened with the first wastewater treatment plant bid, like, it never gets settled. It continues to evolve more and more and more.
It's
So
just, yeah.
we have to, even though we're a public entity, let's act private.
But
This
anyway,
was-
that would be one heck of I know they're expensive and whatever, but anyway, I've got just a couple things on the chamber. Please join us on the 31st of this month at 7:30 in the morning here at City Hall, because I know Martha will be here at 7:30 in the morning for breakfast with Mayor Buck.
Oh,
And so we have to prop up Martha to help
At
put
7:30?
coffee into her and have some things. You don't actually have to be, but it's a great event. I think it would be wonderful if counselors would show up. It's a great bridge for the chamber and for chamber members, the chamber board and a number of chamber members. And it's a great event. Mayor Buck did a great job last year and really gave some good positive feedback, and people walked away really with another positive impression of how Lake Oswego works. And then also on February 26th is the big event for the 2025 Community Awards at the Iron Light from 5:30 to 8:30. So if you need tickets, talk to Megan, and she will arrange for that. Chamber did have lots of interest, just for feedback, on, we've been talking about it in various ways throughout the meeting. Everyone does have on their minds the fires and emergency preparedness. And when I talked to Alistair, who's the president or chairman, I'm not sure what he is, chair of the board of the chamber, he said, hey, the chamber is more than willing to help organize or be a catalyst if there's some money available to help bridge some of this preparedness with the business community as well as the residents and so on. The chamber would be willing to look at things, and there's some, he mentioned there's some national emergency preparedness type things that are available. But anyway, a lot of people that he's heard from are, it's even just information. Chief Johnson did a great seminar with the chamber, and people were eased a little bit. But there's just a big, I don't know, when disasters happen, you kind of do self-reflection, and that's kind of what people are doing. So that should be on our list somewhere. TAB, Transportation Advisory Board. We had a great presentation on the 4 new pathways for 2025 that are going to be taking place. I forgot where all of them are, but it's the next in the priorities. And I just have to tell everyone that we had the review of the first 4 that we did, and there were great pictures of the before and afters. They are making a huge difference in our community, and I just think the next phase will do the same thing, and it's well worth the effort, and I want to thank the council for supporting that. And then they released the yearly traffic stats, pretty much all of them reduced, so.
the counts?
Yeah, all the criteria that they measure, all the stuff that they, traffic, whatever, all the different criteria. The what? Volumes and speeds and everything else decreased. So we're on a good trend. They kind of went down for COVID and up, and then they're kind of slipping down just a little bit. So now that could be part of how many patrol officers we're having issuing tickets to. So I mean, there's some part to that. But that takes me into 20 is plenty, or no, 20 is fun, 20, whatever you call it.
Yes.
There's a lot of information that the TAB is working on, and I would suggest having a study session sooner than later if we're going to approach that as a goal. You guys need to be updated on our traffic engineer, Farley, was great in presenting to them. They have a number of people who have gone through the presentation now for 2 or 3 transportation board meetings. They're kind of getting a lot of familiarity with the subject. And I think it's probably getting close to the time where it's baked enough that we should have a study session on that. And it wouldn't take very long, but I think there's some really good information in there for you to know about where they would put stop signs and rationale and some things, because I think the TAB needs some direction from council on which way to go. Because I will say there's a number of them after going through the analysis, they're saying, okay, the stats don't show we have an issue. Actually, they have some traffic studies that show that the miles per hour that people are going, and it's actually a lot lower than I thought it would be. There's some that are already like in the low 20s and in neighborhoods. And so they're asking, you have to understand that the TAB people are mostly engineers, so they look at data, and that's the big thing that they're looking at is get us more data, because it's so far we're not quite thoroughly convinced. But overall, they think it's still a good idea, but they just need to be engineered about it and make sure that they have
We'll get it
good
on
data. So anyway, that's a suggestion.
We would love to talk about 20th Point.
Oh, yeah, so
Thank you,
plenty is
Councilor.
plenty.
Great updates. Councilor Booth, thank you.
No,
Very
very
thorough.
good, man.
Thank you.
I
I love that.
I'm
You
impressed.
Said
Look
we
at
were
that.
supposed to do that, and
Well, I
Yeah.
did 5 years ago.
No,
Oh, for you.
Mr. Mayor, and dear councilors, I have a very important message to deliver today, because I just want to know that people know that I am an immigrant, and I'm very proud to be an immigrant. And I think there is no American who say they're real American that do more than we do as immigrants in this city and in this country. And I am an American more than anyone. Yesterday, I listened to the president's discourse. I know we always try to avoid what is national, but there were some very scary things, and some members of the community talked to me. And I just want to tell them that the council I serve will never allow in our community that we consider that there is only two genders, that our police will never work to harass anybody that is in our community. And I want it to be a pledge that we make, that in Lake Oswego, everybody is important. We are gonna continue to celebrate and to raise the flag, the pride flag in Lake Oswego. Today I received something from LO for Love to sponsor the gay pride. I will sponsor it. And I want people to know that no one in our community will be tolerated to go anyway, because what we heard yesterday is to ask students in their school to tell transgender kids or gay kids that, oh, there is only one gender in here, and it won't happen. And I hope our colleague of the school district will make sure that those are not tolerated, and that in here we do it, and it's a pledge. America is one of the greatest experiences in human history. It has shown around the world its leadership in human rights, in everything that we value in this world. And President Reagan called it the shining city over the hill, and it will stay that way. There is no golden era. We are in the era of modern America. There is no going back to anything. And I want to tell people that I serve here in a local government of America, and I will never support for coming in from anywhere policy that ostracize other folks or scare other folks. And I wanted today to pledge that and also that no one can scare me. No one can do anything to do. I will never, there are some values that nothing can make me relinquish those values. And those values are respecting everybody, the values of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what I wanted today to say, and thank you. And I'm very proud to work with you as my fellow Americans and my fellow council members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. I think it's so great in our, being in local government and amongst our community that we, remain in charge of our own destiny here, guided by the words and actions of our fellow community members and what they want to see. And, there's just nothing that stands in the way of us ever doing what we want to accomplish here and espousing our own community values and creating the sense of place in Lake Oswego that makes us the great community that we are. So thank you for those words. Councilor Afghan.
I wanted to thank Councilor Mahbub for putting this topic on the table. As an immigrant, an American, I will support that 100%. We all stood out here and we committed to upholding the Constitution of the United States. And every meeting, we pledged to the flag of the United States for justice for all. And therefore, some of the stuff that have been said already, I cannot support because they're not justice for all and or Constitution of the United States. Thank you for putting this topic out for discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. City Manager? Okay. Well, folks, we are now going to move into executive session, and I will ask City Attorney Osnak to read the legal parameters for us.
Thank you, Mayor Buck, members of the council. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub I and sub F. And the purpose is for you all to review and evaluate the employment-related performance of your city charter officers. There are also records that are exempt by law from public inspection that you all can consider. Representatives of the news media are allowed to attend the executive session in the adjoining room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session, as I previously just announced. No decision will be made in executive session, as this is just a performance review. We will not be returning to open session after the conclusion of executive session in the adjoining room.
Thank you, Ms. Osnak. Yes, so this will conclude the broadcast portion of the meeting. We will recess and re-adjourn in executive session in the side room. Thank you. Good night.